she whispered. "May I ride with you?" His words changed her life that night. The woman didn't step onto the trail like someone asking for help. She stepped onto it like someone stepping in front of a firing line, barefoot in the snow, one hand gripping a little boy's shoulder so hard his coat bunched up under her fingers. Her lips barely moved because she'd learned that loud voices get punished. "May I ride with you?" she whispered. Ethan Rourke's horse snorted, steam rolling out into the moonlight. Ethan's hand went to the rifle across his saddle before his brain finished catching up. He should have kept riding. A man alone survives. A man who stops gets buried. But the boy's eyes were glassy with cold, and the woman's wrists. God! Her wrists were marked like somebody had tied her up and yanked until skin gave way. Ethan leaned down, voice low and rough. "You don't have to whisper." He held her gaze like a promise he hadn't earned yet. "Get up. You're safe on my trail." Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from. For a heartbeat, the woman looked like she didn't understand the language, like those words didn't exist in her world. Then the sound came, far off, faint but sharp enough to slice through the wind. Hooves, not one horse, several, riding hard, no care for noise, no fear of being heard. The woman's head snapped toward the dark behind her. The boy's breath hitched. He tried to shrink into her coat as if cloth could turn him invisible. "Please," she breathed, and it wasn't a plea for kindness, it was a plea for speed. Ethan's jaw tightened. He scanned the road, open, white, flat, the kind of country that shows you your death from a mile away. The moon was bright enough to betray them. If those riders were searching, they'd find 3 shadows on snow in seconds. "Up," Ethan said, and it came out like an order because panic had no place to sit. "Both of you." I can't." Her knees buckled when she tried to move, and Ethan understood then. She wasn't just cold. She was running on something that was already gone, the last of her strength. Ethan swung down, boots crunching into ice. He grabbed the boy first because the child weighed nothing and because he could feel the tremor through him. The boy's fingers were blue at the tips, nails bruised dark. Ethan cursed under his breath and hauled him up onto the saddle in front of him. The woman flinched when Ethan reached for her. Instinct, like a dog expecting a kick. "Easy," Ethan said, softer now. "I'm not him." Her eyes flicked up. You know? "I know enough," Ethan cut in, because he didn't have time to learn her story in the snow. He didn't have time to ask names. He grabbed her by the elbow, felt how thin she was under layers that didn't fit right, and boosted her up behind him. She clutched the boy like she could keep him alive by force of grip alone. The hoofbeats grew louder, fast, angry, closing. Ethan turned his horse off the main track without thinking, angling toward a low cut in the land where the wind-piled drifts. He kept the animal at a steady pace, not a gallop. A gallop screams, "Look here." He'd learned that years ago. If you want to disappear, you move like you belong. Behind them, a shout carried, just a piece of it, half-eaten by wind. "There!" The woman made a small, strangled sound. The boy's eyes widened. He started to breathe too fast, mouth opening to cry. Ethan reached back, not to silence, but to steady. He pressed a warm palm over the boy's mouth, gentle, firm. "Shh," he murmured into the child's hair. "I've got you. Breathe through your nose like smelling stew." The boy's eyes locked onto Ethan's for a second. The child obeyed. One breath, then another. Small, controlled. Brave in a way no one should ever have to be. Ethan guided the horse down into the shallow ravine where the snow had drifted high against scrub and rock. The animal slipped once, then caught itself. Ethan leaned low, using the cut in the earth like a wall. The hoofbeats thundered past on the higher ground, close enough that Ethan could hear leather creak, could smell cheap tobacco and horse sweat carried down on the wind. The woman's body went rigid behind him. Her fingernails dug into Ethan's coat like she was trying to anchor herself to something real. A lantern swung above the ridge, light washing the snow in sick yellow arcs. One rider slowed. Ethan froze his horse without a word. He could feel the animal's heart pounding through the saddle. He could feel the boy's ribs fluttering like a trapped bird. The lantern hovered, searching. The rider's silhouette leaned, head turning. The woman whispered, barely a thread of sound. He'll kill him." Ethan didn't answer. If he spoke, his breath would plume. He kept his face down, eyes up, and let the cold bite his cheek until it felt like metal. The rider spat. The sound hit the snow with a wet slap. "Ain't here," the man called back. "Trail's dead." Another voice farther away, thick with authority. "She can't have gone far. Find the boy." The word boy landed like a hand around the child's throat. The kid shuddered, and Ethan tightened his hold on him, not cruel, protective, like a shield. The lantern's light drifted away. The riders moved on, hoofbeats fading into the open night until they were just a memory the wind wanted to erase. Ethan waited longer than his nerves liked, long enough that the woman's nails stopped digging, long enough that the boy's breathing steadied. When he finally nudged his horse forward again, he did it slow, choosing the ravine's path until it spilled out into the shadow of a line of cottonwoods. The woman sagged against his back, weight suddenly heavy. I thought," her voice cracked and she swallowed it down, ashamed of sound. "You're still alive," Ethan said. "That's what matters." "No." She shook her head, and in that single motion, he felt the war inside her, fear fighting something else, something stubborn. "He's still alive," she corrected, and her arms tightened around the boy. Ethan followed the creek bed, using water and trees to hide their trail. He didn't light a lantern. He didn't take the straight way. He rode like a man who'd spent years outrunning mistakes. After a mile, the woman tried to speak again, and each word cost her. "My name is Lila." She forced it out like a confession. "His name is Noah. Please don't take him back." "I'm not taking him anywhere he doesn't belong," Ethan said. The boy, Noah, lifted his head a little. His cheeks were wind-burned raw. "Ma'am says, don't talk," he whispered, like even his voice was a dangerous thing. Ethan felt something in his chest twist hard, sharp, not sympathy, something older, anger. "Not tonight," Ethan said. "Tonight you talk if you need to. You breathe. You stay awake. That's your job." Noah nodded, solemn as a grown man. Lila's throat worked. "You shouldn't help us." Ethan's mouth pulled into something that wasn't a smile. "That's so." "They'll come to your door," she said. "They'll say you stole. They'll say you harmed me. They'll say anything. The sheriff listens to him." "Who's him?" She hesitated. The silence was thick with fear. Then, in the smallest voice, she said, "Crane." Ethan's hands tightened on the reins. The name didn't belong to him, but it belonged to the territory. Power had a way of having one name everyone knew, even if they pretended they didn't. "Darius Crane," Ethan said. Lila flinched like the name struck her. "Don't say it too loud." Ethan kept his voice even. "I'm not scared of words." She let out a sound that might have been a laugh if her life hadn't beaten laughter out of her. "You should be." The wind picked up, throwing needles of ice against them. Ethan kept the horse moving. He didn't promise her justice. He didn't promise her safety forever. Promises were cheap on the frontier. But he could promise something true. "You're not dying out here," he said. "Not you, not the boy." Lila's forehead rested against his back. "Why?" Ethan swallowed. The honest answer was messy. Because he'd once been the kind of man who stopped. Because he'd once had a home and lost it, and now the emptiness felt like a punishment he kept paying even when he didn't know what for. Because letting a child freeze in his arms would carve a hole in him he couldn't live with. So he gave her the only answer he could stand behind. "Because I saw you," Ethan said, "and I'm still human." They rode through the last of the night, the sky slowly paling from black to bruised blue. As dawn crept in, Ethan's cabin appeared, small, crooked, half buried in drifts, smokeless because he'd been gone for days. It wasn't much. It was a roof and 4 walls and a chance to breathe. He slid off the horse and lifted Noah down first. The boy's legs wobbled when they hit snow. Lila tried to climb down on her own, pride again, survival's ugly cousin. She nearly fell. Ethan caught her without thinking. Her body was light, too light, and when his hand wrapped around her forearm, she startled like his touch was a threat. "Sorry," Ethan said immediately, because he wasn't going to become another thing she feared. "I've got you." Lila blinked fast, as if tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. "I'm fine." "No," Ethan said, not unkind. "You're not." Noah stood close to her, and Ethan saw something in the way the boy watched the world, like he was waiting for it to strike. Ethan hated the men who made children like that, hated them without needing their names. He opened the cabin door, Cold air spilled out like a warning. "Inside," Ethan said. "We warm up, then we figure out what comes next." Lila hesitated on the threshold, eyes scanning corners like danger could be hiding behind the table. She took one step in, then another, and only when Noah crossed fully into the room did she follow. The moment the door shut behind them, her knees gave out. Ethan caught her before she hit the floor, feeling her whole body tremble as if now, only now, she was allowed to stop holding herself together. Noah reached for her hand with both of his small ones and held on like a promise. Ethan laid Lila down near the hearth as gently as he could, then shoved wood into the stove and struck a match. The flame caught. Warmth began, slow and stubborn. Outside, the wind howled across empty land. Inside, for the first time all night, Lila's whisper was gone. Only her breath remained. The stove took its time, like it didn't trust anyone enough to burn for them right away. Ethan fed it kindling and split pine, coaxed flame until the iron belly finally began to tick and breathe heat into the cabin. Lila lay on the floor near the hearth where he'd set her, but she didn't rest the way tired people rest. Her eyes stayed open, fixed on the door, fixed on the window, fixed on Ethan's hands every time he moved. The kind of watchfulness that wasn't born in the woods. It was trained. Noah sat tucked against her side, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around his shins. His lashes were rimmed with frost melt. When the stove clicked, he jumped. Ethan crouched a few feet away, slow, palms visible. "I'm going to get you both warm, that's it." Lila's throat worked. Don't come close." "I won't," Ethan said. He pointed with his chin. "There's a kettle. I'm boiling water." Her gaze flicked to the kettle, then to the knife on his table, then back to his face, like she was counting weapons the way other folks counted blessings. Ethan poured water into the iron pot, set it on the stove, then pulled blankets from a trunk at the foot of his bed. They smelled of smoke and old winters. He didn't drape them over her. He placed them on the floor within reach. "Take them if you want," he said. Lila stared at the blankets as if they might bite. Noah reached first, small hands, trembling, and tugged one over their shoulders. Lila didn't stop him. She let him have it, because motherhood wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was just being the wall between a child and the world. Ethan went to his shelves and found what little he had. Dried beans, a heel of bread, a jar of lard. Not much. The kind of food a man keeps when he plans on eating alone and not living long enough to care. He set the bread on the table, tore it in half, and carried the pieces over, setting them down again, always just out of arm's reach so they could choose. Noah's eyes followed the bread like it was a miracle. Lila whispered, "No." Noah didn't move. He waited for her permission like permission was oxygen. Ethan exhaled through his nose, kept his voice steady. "If you don't eat, you'll fall asleep and not wake up. That ain't kindness, that's foolishness." Lila's jaw clenched. She looked at the bread, then at Noah, and something in her broke, not loudly, quietly, like a thread snapping. "Take it," she told Noah, voice raw. "Small bites." Noah reached, grabbed, and shoved a piece into his mouth like someone might snatch it away. He chewed fast, eyes still on Ethan, not trusting that a full mouth meant safety. Ethan held his hands up again. "Slow," he murmured. "You choke. You'll scare yourself." Noah swallowed hard. Tried again. Smaller bite this time. Lila watched the child eat, and the muscles in her face kept tightening as if she expected punishment to arrive the second he enjoyed it. Ethan turned back to the stove, pretended to fuss with the pot just to give them space. When the water began to steam, he poured it into a basin and set it on the floor near them. "I need to see his hands," he said, nodding at Noah. Lila's arms tightened around the boy. "No." Ethan didn't argue. He just sat down on his own floor, far enough away to show he meant it. "Your choice," he said. "But I've seen frostbite. If it takes his fingers, it won't stop there. It'll crawl." Noah looked down at his hands. The skin was red-purple, swollen, angry. He flexed them and winced, but didn't cry. Lila swallowed. He's strong." "He's 7, Ethan said, and the words came out rougher than he meant. He softened his tone. "Let me help him, Lila." Hearing her name from a man's mouth, spoken plainly, not spit like an insult, made her blink hard. She hesitated just long enough for Ethan to see the war in her, fear on one side, Noah's pain on the other. Finally, she shifted, guiding Noah's hands out from under the blanket. "Don't hurt him." "I won't," Ethan said. He slid the basin closer, careful, then reached for Noah's fingers like they were made of glass. Noah flinched, but he didn't pull away. He was watching Ethan's face, not his hands, learning whether this man's gentleness was real. Ethan eased Noah's hands into the warm water. Not hot, just warm. Noah sucked in a breath, sharp, then let it out slow. "It burns," Noah whispered. "That means blood's coming back," Ethan said. "Burning's good right now." Noah's eyes watered. He blinked them back hard. "Ma'am says crying makes men mad." Ethan's throat tightened. He kept his focus on Noah's hands. "Then your ma'am's been around the wrong men." Lila's head snapped up. "Don't—" The protest died in her mouth, like she didn't know what to do with agreement. Ethan found a tin of salve, bear fat and herbs, and rubbed it between his palms to warm it before touching Noah's skin. When he finally did, Noah hissed through his teeth, but he didn't fight. "You're doing good," Ethan told him. "Real good." Noah stared at him a second, suspicious of praise. Then he nodded once, as if accepting a job. "Yes, sir." Ethan glanced at Lila. "How long you been out there?" Lila's eyes flicked to the window. "Long enough?" "That ain't an answer." "It's the safest one," she said quietly. Ethan didn't push. He dried Noah's hands, wrapped them in cloth, then pulled off his own coat and draped it near the boy, again without touching. Put that on," he told Noah. "It's thick." Noah looked at Lila. Lila gave the smallest nod. Noah slid into the coat and disappeared inside it. It swallowed him, made him look even smaller. Ethan stood, went to his bed, and stripped it fast. Blankets, quilt, all of it. He carried the pile over and set it down by the hearth. "You take the bed," he said to Lila. Lila stared like he'd offered her the moon. "No, I wasn't asking." Her mouth tightened. "Men don't give away beds." Ethan's eyes held hers. "I do." She laughed once, short and ugly, like pain pretending to be humor. "Why?" "Because if he didn't, he'd spend the rest of his life seeing her collapse on his floor. Because his cabin had never sounded so human as it did with a child breathing in it. Because he was sick of being a man who rode past." But he didn't say any of that. He shrugged. "Because it's cold." Lila didn't move. She kept her body between Noah and Ethan like a shield. Ethan stepped back. "Fine. You want the floor? Take the blankets. But you rest. That's the price of staying here." Her eyes narrowed. "Price?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "You don't get to die in my cabin. Not allowed." For the first time, something flickered across Lila's face that wasn't fear, not relief. Something like disbelief with a crack of hope trying to force its way in. Noah's eyelids began to droop. Exhaustion was finally winning. His head tipped against Lila's arm. Lila's voice dropped lower. "We can't stay." Ethan went to his shelf, pulled down a bottle of whiskey and poured a small amount into a cup, not for drinking. He dipped a rag in it and held it up. "This will sting," he said, "but it'll clean those marks." Lila's hands went to her wrists automatically. The bruises there were dark, ringed with scraped skin, rope burn, and something worse. She stared at the rag like it was a threat. "Don't." Ethan set the cup down. "Then don't." He didn't reach. He didn't insist. He just sat at the table and began slicing the remaining bread, slow, like a man with nowhere to be. He let the quiet do the work he couldn't. After a long moment, Lila's voice came out thin. "If they find us—" "They won't," Ethan said. She shook her head. "They always do." Ethan's knife paused. "Who is they?" Lila swallowed. "Crane's men." Ethan looked at her wrists again, looked at Noah's face. "And Crane did that?" Lila's eyes flashed. "Crane doesn't get his hands dirty." "Then who?" Lila's lips parted, then closed. She was choosing words the way someone chooses a path through wolves. "His foreman," she said at last. "His deputy. His friends." Ethan's jaw tightened. "The sheriff." A beat. Lila didn't answer, but her silence was a confession. The kettle hissed, the stove clicked. Noah shifted, sleep pulling him down like water. Ethan stood and moved to the trunk again, grabbed a spare shirt and a pair of old long johns. He set them down beside Lila. "Change when you can," he said. "I'll face the other way." Lila's eyebrows lifted, suspicious. "Why?" Ethan's voice went flat with truth. Because I'm not giving you another reason to be afraid. He turned his back to them, went to the far corner of the cabin, and pretended to check the window latch. He heard fabric rustle, heard Lila's breathing speed up, heard her swallow little sounds like she was ashamed of being human. Then a soft, broken whisper. "Noah, turn around," the boy mumbled, half asleep. "Okay, ma'am." Ethan stared at the frost on the window pane and waited. In the glass, he could see shadows moving. Lila, careful and quick. Noah, obedient. When she was done, her voice came again, quieter than before, but steadier. "You can turn." Ethan did. Lila wore the shirt, too big, sleeves hanging past her hands, but it looked clean. It looked like a life that belonged to her for once. Ethan's gaze dropped to the hem near her hip. Something there was wrong. The fabric was thicker in one spot, stitched in a hurry, not for mending, for hiding. Lila noticed his eyes and instantly pulled the shirt down, body going rigid again. Ethan held up his hands. "I ain't reaching for you." Lila's eyes were hard. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you know." Ethan didn't answer. He walked back to his table, sat down slowly, and kept his voice calm. "I don't know your story, Lila, but I know you're running from more than cold." Lila's throat bobbed. "We have to leave before daylight." "And go where?" Ethan asked. "You got a plan besides dying on the road?" Lila opened her mouth, closed it. Her gaze drifted to Noah, who was slumped now, asleep against her thigh. The boy's face had softened in sleep, his guard down just enough to show how young he really was. Her voice cracked. "I had a plan." Ethan waited. Lila stared at the floor like it might swallow her. "My father," the words caught. She forced them through. "My father owned a small piece of land, not much, but it was ours. He got sick. Crane came around with kindness, offered medicine, offered help, offered papers." Ethan's face didn't change, but something in him went cold. He'd seen that kindness before, the kind that smiles while it steals. "He said he'd look after me," Lila continued, voice shaking with fury now. "Said he'd be my guardian until I married, until I could handle things." "And your father?" Ethan asked. "Died," Lila said, like the word was a blade she'd been carrying in her mouth. "And the day after we buried him, Crane's men moved into the house. They told me where I could sleep, what I could eat, what I could say. They said I owed Crane for the doctor, for the coffin, for the kindness." Ethan's hands curled around the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. Lila's eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. He started bringing men by. Men who looked at me like I was the last piece of meat on a bone. Ethan's voice came out low. "Did he touch you?" Lila flinched at the question like it slapped her. Then she lifted her chin, and her eyes were pure steel. "He tried." Ethan's breath left him slow. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. The bruises and the whisper had said enough. Lila swallowed hard. "Noah isn't mine." Ethan's eyes flicked to the boy. He was the cook's son," Lila said. "His mama worked the ranch kitchen. She died in childbirth. Crane said the boy was now indebted to him too. He said children paid debts with their hands." Ethan's stomach twisted. Lila's voice lowered. "They were going to send him to the mine camp tomorrow. That's why I ran tonight." Ethan stood so fast his chair scraped. Noah stirred at the sound, half waking, eyes wide for a second. Lila's hand immediately went to the boy's shoulder, calming him. Ethan forced himself to breathe. He paced once, then stopped, back to the table, hands flat like he needed the wood to hold him down. "Mine camp," he said. "That's how many boys disappear up there?" Lila's whisper returned, but now it wasn't fear. It was disgust. "Too many." Ethan looked at her again, at the sewn hem. "You got papers?" Lila's eyes snapped up. "No." "You do," Ethan said, not accusing, certain. "You're hiding something in your clothes." Lila rose to her knees instantly, eyes wild. "Don't you touch me." "I'm not," Ethan said. "But if you're carrying proof, if you're carrying anything that can fight Crane in daylight, you don't leave it buried in snow." Lila's breathing went sharp. She clutched the hem like it was her heart. "If he finds it, he'll kill me." And if you keep running without using it, he'll kill you anyway, Ethan said. He'll kill the boy. He'll kill the next one after him. Lila's face crumpled for a second, like the weight of all those unseen children was finally allowed to land. Then she did something Ethan didn't expect. She tore the stitches open herself. Her fingers shook so badly she fumbled at first, but she forced them steady. From inside the hem she pulled a folded paper wrapped in oilcloth, kept dry, kept alive. She held it like it burned. Ethan didn't reach. "What is it?" Lila stared at the paper, then up at him. "My father's deed, his filings, a letter from a lawyer in Cheyenne, before Crane got to him. It proves the land is mine. It proves Crane's guardianship was crooked." Ethan let out a slow breath. "That's worth more than gold," Lila laughed bitter. "Not in a town where Crane owns the judge's dinner." Ethan's gaze drifted to the window. Dawn was still a ways off, but the black outside was thinning. He could almost hear the territory waking up, chains rattling, boots hitting porches, folks pretending they didn't see what was in front of them. In the distance, faint as memory, a bell began to ring, church bell from the town down the road, calling clean people to clean prayers. Lila heard it too. Her shoulders tightened. "They'll be awake soon." Ethan nodded once, the decision forming before he spoke it. "I'm going to town." Lila went still. "No." "I need supplies," Ethan said. "Food, medicine, blankets, and answers. I need to know where Crane's men are, what the sheriff's saying, what kind of lie they're spreading." "They'll recognize you," Lila whispered. "They'll follow you back." "I won't bring them back," Ethan said. "I've ridden longer than most men have lived. I know how to lose a tail." Lila's fingers dug into the paper. "Don't leave us." The words were small, not dramatic, just truth, naked on the floor. Ethan's chest tightened hard enough it almost hurt. "I'm not leaving you," he corrected gently. "I'm going to town and coming back." Lila's eyes searched his face like she was looking for the trick. "Why would you come back?" Ethan looked at Noah, asleep now, mouth slightly open, one hand still clutching the edge of her shirt. "Because he's still breathing," Ethan said. "And because you trusted me enough to step through my door." Lila's voice fell apart. "Trust isn't safe." "No," Ethan agreed, "but it's what you got." He walked to the peg by his bed and lifted his rifle down, checked the chamber, then set it back against the wall. He wasn't going to walk into town looking like a war. He strapped on his belt knife, then pulled his hat low. "I'll hide your tracks," he said. "If anyone comes, you don't open the door. You hear me?" Lila nodded once, stiff. "If they break it down?" Ethan paused. There was an old revolver in his drawer, rusted but working. He opened the drawer, took it out, and set it on the floor by her knee. Lila stared at it like it was a snake. Ethan's voice stayed soft. "Only if you must. Only if they're taking the boy." Lila's hand hovered over the gun but didn't touch it. I don't know if I can." Ethan crouched, just for a second, keeping space between them. "You already did," he said. "You ran. That took more courage than shooting." Lila swallowed hard, eyes shining. "Don't make me brave. I don't feel brave." Ethan stood again. "Brave ain't a feeling. It's what you do when fear's driving." He went to the door, opened it a crack, and cold rushed in. The world outside was pale and empty and cruel. Before he stepped out, he looked back. Lila sat on his floor with a sleeping boy in her lap, one hand hovering over a revolver she didn't want, the other hand clutching proof that could burn a powerful man alive if it ever saw daylight. Ethan's voice lowered. "I'll be back before that bell stops ringing." Then he stepped into the cold, pulled the door shut behind him, and mounted his horse without looking like a man who was afraid. Ethan rode into town like he belonged there, because acting like you didn't belong was the fastest way to get noticed. The main street was a ribbon of packed snow and mud, wagon ruts frozen into grooves that could snap an axle if you hit them wrong. Smoke lifted from chimneys in lazy columns, and the air smelled like coal, horse sweat, and frying grease. Warmth for sale if you had the coin. People were out early, not because they were eager, because winter didn't care about comfort, and neither did bosses. He kept his hat brim low, his shoulders loose, and his eyes moving. A couple men outside the saloon glanced at him and went quiet, mid-laugh. One of them spat into the snow, slow, deliberate, like he was marking territory. Ethan's horse clopped past without changing pace. To his left, the mercantile's windows were fogged with breath and heat. To his right, the sheriff's office squatted like a promise nobody trusted. A wooden sign swung in the wind, Sheriff, letters chipped by years of authority and neglect, and behind the saloon, half hidden from the polite part of town, Ethan saw them. Children, 3 of them, maybe 4, all small enough that their coats hung like sacks, all moving with the same stiff economy of motion, no wasted energy, because wasted energy meant hunger later. They were hauling slop buckets, scraping frozen muck from the back steps, stacking split wood higher than their shoulders. One boy's sleeve was torn, the skin beneath raw and red. Ethan reined in just a little, not enough to draw attention. The boy looked up. Their eyes met. The kid's gaze slid away instantly, like looking at a grown man too long could bring trouble. He bent back over his work, shoulders tight. A door banged open. A drunk voice barked, "Move, you little rat!" And something, maybe a boot, maybe a hand, connected with a dull thud. One of the kids stumbled, caught himself, didn't cry, didn't even flinch the way a normal child would. He just kept moving. Ethan's fingers tightened on the reins until the leather bit his palm. He turned his horse toward the mercantile instead. Rage didn't feed anybody. Rage got you shot in the street while the same children went back to work. Inside the store, heat hit him hard, thick with the smell of flour and tobacco. Shelves crowded with canned goods, nails, lamp oil, bolts of cloth. A few women in shawls stood near a barrel of apples, picking through bruised ones like they were choosing the least painful choice. Behind the counter, a man with graying hair and a tired face looked up. "Morning," the man said. His voice was polite, but his eyes weren't. His eyes measured Ethan the way the frontier measured everyone. What you had, what you wanted, and how much trouble followed you. "Morning," Ethan replied. "Need supplies." The man nodded once. "Name?" Ethan didn't give it, not yet. "Just passing through." The man's mouth tightened. "Nobody's just passing through in winter." Ethan set a coin on the counter. "Flour, dried meat if you got it, salt, a blanket, and salve." At the word salve, the man's gaze dropped to Ethan's hands, as if searching for the reason. "Hard times?" the man asked, quiet. Ethan kept his face blank. "Cold makes hard times." The man turned, started gathering items with practiced motions, but he moved slower than necessary, like he was buying time. Outside, through the fogged window, Ethan saw the sheriff's deputy cross the street, tall, stiff-backed, gun belt hanging like a warning. The deputy's eyes swept the mercantile's front, paused, then moved on. Ethan didn't move. He didn't stare back. A stare was an invitation. When the storekeeper returned, he set the goods down with a soft thump. His hand lingered on the salve tin. "You got family out there?" he asked. Ethan met his eyes. "I got folks who need to warm up," the man nodded once, barely. "You'll want more than one blanket." Ethan slid another coin over. "Then ring it," the storekeeper leaned in, voice dropping. "Sheriff's got a temper lately." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Sheriff always had a temper." The man's eyes flicked toward the door like it might be listening. "Sheriff's got instructions." Ethan let the silence stretch long enough to make it real. From Crane. The name landed between them like a stone. The storekeeper's jaw worked. He didn't deny it. Denial was what cowards did when truth was too dangerous. "They say a girl ran," the man murmured, "with a boy. Folks are talking like it's thievery, like the boy belongs to somebody else." Ethan's blood cooled. He forced his voice to stay even. "And does he?" The storekeeper's eyes sharpened. "That depends who's asking." Ethan slid his purchase sack toward himself. "A man who doesn't like children freezing." For a second, the storekeeper's face softened, just a crack. Then it hardened again, because softness in this town got punished. He pulled a small bundle from under the counter, 2 strips of dried venison wrapped in paper, and shoved it into Ethan's bag without counting it. Ethan's gaze flicked up. The man muttered, almost angry, "Don't thank me. Just don't bring fire back on my doorstep." Ethan nodded once. "I won't." As Ethan turned toward the door, a woman stepped in, late 30s maybe, cheeks pink from cold, eyes sharp in a way that wasn't unkind. She carried a basket of eggs in a calm that didn't match the town's nervous twitch. She saw Ethan's bag, then saw his face. Her gaze didn't slide away like the children's. It held, steady. "You're not from here," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan's hand tightened on the bag strap. "No." Her eyes moved over him, boots worn, coat mended, posture of a man who's slept outside more nights than inside. Then, like she'd decided something, she angled her basket closer to her chest. "If you're headed back out," she said softly, "take the south cut past Miller's Creek. Sheriff's boys like the main road." Ethan studied her. "Why would you tell me that?" The woman's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Because I'm tired of watching bad men win just because good men prefer quiet." Ethan held her gaze. "Name?" She hesitated, then gave it like she was daring him to use it wrong. "Sarah Whitcomb." Ethan nodded. "You got a husband, Mrs. Whitcomb?" Her eyes flicked toward the church at the end of the street where a bell rope hung inside the doorway. "I do." "And he's—" "A preacher," she said, and there was no pride in it, only exhaustion. Ethan almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Preacher got a spine?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "He has a heart. Some days that's not the same thing." Ethan didn't argue. He tipped his hat. "Appreciate the road advice." Sarah's gaze sharpened. "If you're mixed up in that girl's trouble—" "I'm not mixed up," Ethan lied, because lying was safer than dragging this woman into it. Sarah didn't buy it. She looked at the salve tin peeking out of his bag, looked at the extra blanket, then she looked back up and spoke like a warning and a prayer in one. "Crane doesn't forgive. He collects." Ethan's voice went low. "So do I." He stepped back into the cold. The street felt different now, like eyes had shifted, like the town had noticed him in the way a wolf pack notices a limping deer. He kept walking, leading his horse by the reins toward the blacksmith's, because it gave him a reason to move. Sparks flew from the forge, bright against the gray morning. The blacksmith, big man with a soot-covered face, hammered iron without looking up. A boy, maybe 12, worked the bellows, shoulders trembling with the effort, too young, too thin. Same trained silence. Ethan stopped near the doorway, voice casual. "You shoe horses?" The blacksmith glanced up, eyes flat. "If they pay." Ethan nodded toward his own horse. "Need his back left checked." The blacksmith grunted and waved him in like Ethan was another chore. While the man lifted the hoof and inspected it, Ethan kept his gaze on the boy at the bellows. "What's his name?" Ethan asked. The blacksmith didn't look at the boy. "Boy!" Ethan's jaw flexed. "That ain't a name." The blacksmith's hammer paused in midair. He looked at Ethan then, slow. "You asking questions you don't need answered." Ethan let his voice stay calm. "Just making talk." The blacksmith leaned closer, breath smelling of smoke and something bitter. "Make it somewhere else. Sheriff don't like strangers making talk." Ethan nodded once, filed the warning away. From outside, the church bell began to ring. Slow, steady, as if sound could wash dirt off sins without anyone lifting a hand. People came out of buildings like they'd been waiting for permission to be seen. Men in clean coats, women with braided hair pinned tight, children scrubbed and silent, different children than the ones behind the saloon. Those kids stood in rows, hands folded, eyes lowered. The town had its good children and its hidden ones. Ethan led his horse down the street, passing the saloon again. Behind it, the working kids didn't stop. The bell didn't call them. God was apparently only for the clean. One of the smallest children, a girl with dark hair and a face too serious, slipped on ice and dropped a bucket. Slop splashed across her dress, cold and foul. She froze, eyes widening in terror, like the mess mattered more than the cold. A man from the saloon doorway barked, "Look at that, clumsy little thing." He stepped forward, boot lifting, and Ethan moved before he thought. Ethan crossed the gap in 3 strides and caught the man's wrist mid-swing. The man jerked, startled. "What the—" Ethan's grip tightened just enough to make the point. "She's a child." The man's eyes narrowed, taking Ethan in. "You her pa?" "No," Ethan said. "Then mind your business." Ethan's voice went like iron. "This is my business." The man tried to pull free and couldn't. Color rose in his face. "You got a death wish, stranger?" Ethan leaned in slightly, not threatening with volume, threatening with certainty. "You kick her, I break your hand. Then you'll spend the rest of winter wiping yourself with your good one." The man stared, shocked at being challenged. Then his gaze flicked past Ethan's shoulder, and the smugness returned like a coat put back on. Ethan felt it before he saw it. Boots on snow, a badge glinting dull in daylight. The deputy from earlier stood a few yards away, hand resting near his holster like he'd been born with it there. His face was young but already mean around the mouth. "Well now," the deputy drawled, "what's this?" Ethan released the drunk's wrist and stepped back, hands open. Man was going to kick a child. The deputy's eyes slid to the girl. She stood stiff, face blank, eyes on the ground. She didn't dare react. She didn't dare be grateful. The deputy shrugged like it was weather. "And?" Ethan's stomach twisted. "And that's wrong." The deputy's smile was thin. "Wrong ain't illegal." "It ought to be," Ethan said. The deputy's gaze sharpened. "You got a lot of oughts for a man just passing through." Ethan kept his voice steady. "Just buying supplies." The deputy stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see his chapped lips, the stubble on his jaw. "Sheriff likes to know who's buying what." Ethan's eyes didn't move. "Then tell him I bought flour." The deputy's gaze dropped to Ethan's bag, lingered on the extra blanket, on the salve, on the dried meat. "Seems like a lot for one man," the deputy said. Ethan's pulse stayed calm by force. "I get hungry." The deputy laughed once, humorless. "You got a name?" Ethan could lie. He could give a fake. But a fake name in a small town stuck out worse than no name at all. He gave the truth, because truth used right was a weapon. Ethan Rourke. The deputy's eyes flickered. Recognition, maybe, or just satisfaction at having something to report. "Rourke," he repeated, like tasting it. "Where you staying?" Ethan tilted his head. "You asking me as a friend or as the law?" The deputy's smile vanished. "You got smart mouth." Ethan didn't blink. "You got a hand on your gun for a conversation." The deputy leaned in, voice dropping. "There's talk of stolen property, a boy, a girl. Sheriff's gonna put up a notice." Ethan forced himself not to react. "Lots of talk." "Talk turns into rope," the deputy said softly, eyes bright with the pleasure of it. "If you see something, you tell someone." Ethan's voice went low. "If I see a child being hurt, I'll stop it. You can write that down too." The deputy stared at him for a beat, then stepped back like he'd decided Ethan wasn't worth shooting in broad daylight. Not yet. He jerked his chin toward the church. "Keep your hands to yourself today." Ethan looked down at the small girl still standing in the slop, shivering. He reached into his bag, pulled out a strip of dried venison, and held it out to her. Low, not sudden, like offering a wild animal food. The girl didn't move. Her eyes flicked to the deputy. Ethan's chest tightened. He placed the venison on a clean patch of snow near her feet and stepped away. "It's yours," he said quietly. "Nobody has to give it to you." The girl's lip trembled once. Then she ducked her head, snatched it like a thief, and vanished behind the stack of firewood. Ethan turned, led his horse down the street, feeling the deputy's eyes drilling into his back. At the edge of town, he paused long enough to glance at the board outside the sheriff's office. Fresh paper was already being tacked up, corners flapping in the wind. He didn't get close enough to read it. He didn't need to. He could feel it in his bones. They were making a story. And stories were how powerful men turned victims into criminals. Ethan rode out without taking the main road, just like Sarah Whitcomb had said. South cut, past Miller's Creek, through trees and low land where tracks got lost and men got careless. He didn't gallop. He didn't look back. He counted heartbeats instead, measured the world by sound. When the town's noise faded behind him, Ethan let himself breathe once, slow, controlled. Then he angled his horse into the cottonwoods, where the snow lay untouched and the silence felt like a promise he intended to keep. The cabin wasn't Ethan's anymore. It was a lung-holding breath. 3 rescued kids sat in the corner where the firelight died. Clara, all sharp elbows in defiance. Jonah, a mute boy gripping a chipped spoon like a knife. And little Maggie, fever-hot in Lila's arms. Noah pressed against Lila's side, one bandaged hand hooked into her sleeve, as if she was the only thing keeping him on earth. Ethan had barely set down the flour and blankets from town when his horse began to stamp outside, nervous, warning. Then the knock came. Not neighbor-soft, not uncertain, hard, certain, twice. Lila's head lifted like a hunted animal hearing the trap snap. Ethan raised one finger. Not hush, control. He pointed to the trap door by the hearth. Now. Clara moved first, fast like she'd practiced fear. Jonah slid after her. Noah followed, eyes huge. Lila lowered Maggie down last, whispering something into the girl's hair that sounded like a promise she didn't fully believe. Ethan eased the plank shut, pulled the rug back over it, and went to the door without touching his rifle. A gun at your own threshold was the kind of picture men like Crane loved to paint into guilt. He opened the door a hand's width. Cold rushed in, and 4 riders with it, 2 deputies in badges, 1 ranch hand with Crane's brand on his coat, and in front, Deputy Harlan, pale-eyed and smiling like a man who enjoyed other people's panic. "Ethan Rourke," Harlan said, sweet. "Sheriff's business." Ethan's voice stayed flat. "You lost?" Harlan lifted a paper. "Warrant, stolen property." The ranch hand leaned forward, eager. "And a runaway." Ethan didn't blink. "I don't keep property," Harlan chuckled. "Depends whose paper you read." His eyes slid past Ethan into the dim cabin. "Sheriff says there's a boy taken from lawful guardianship and a girl with him. Might be hurt, might be held against her will, might be—" He tilted his head. "You're about to make your life real complicated." "Let me see it," Ethan said. Harlan shoved the paper toward the gap. Ethan read without taking. Sheriff's seal, legal words, a name stamped too neatly to be honest. Darius Crane. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Crane doesn't own children." Harlan's smile thinned. "Crane owns the sheriff. That's close enough in this town." Behind Ethan, the stove ticked. Under the floor, a small cough, quickly swallowed, shivered through the boards. Harlan's eyes sharpened. "You got company inside?" Ethan held him steady. "Just me." Harlan looked like he was tasting the lie, deciding whether to bite. "Open the door wider." "No," Ethan said. The violent deputy behind Harlan shifted his stance, hand hovering near his holster. The younger deputy looked away, ashamed of his own badge. Harlan stepped closer until his breath fogged the air between them. "We know she's here. We watched you in town. Salve, blankets, extra food. You ain't buying that for yourself." Ethan's voice dropped. "That boy ain't property." Harlan's eyes glittered. "That depends who's paying for him." The ranch hand pulled out a lantern and lit it, swinging the yellow light toward the doorway to see past Ethan's body. Ethan caught the handle mid-swing and jerked it down. "Don't!" The ranch hand yanked back. Oil sloshed. The lantern slipped, struck the threshold, and cracked. Fire licked along spilled oil like it had been waiting. For half a breath, everyone froze. Then Harlan cursed and kicked at the flame, and the violent deputy lunged, trying to use the confusion to shove inside. Ethan slammed the door into the deputy's shoulder, pinning him hard. "You step in here, you don't step out," the deputy snarled. "Resisting authority." "You're resisting decency," Ethan growled. Harlan's gaze snapped to the cabin floor as if he could hear what was hidden under it. He lifted his voice, loud enough to reach the boards and the children beneath them. "Lila Hart, sheriff's got a warrant for you. Come out and make this easy." Under the floor, Noah made a small, broken sound. Ethan's stomach turned to stone. He forced his face calm. "No Lila here." Harlan smiled like a man holding a rope. "Lying to law, Rourke. That's a hanging kind of mistake." Ethan leaned into the doorway, voice quiet and deadly. "You ain't law. You're paper and bribes." The ranch hand spat. "We'll drag her out." Ethan grabbed a blanket from the peg and slapped it down over the burning oil, smothering the flame. Smoke still curled, bitter and thick. He coughed once, eyes stinging. The front door shuddered as the men hit it with their shoulders. Wood groaned. The bar held, barely. Ethan turned sharply, voice ripping through the cabin. "Lila, back door, move!" The rug shifted. The trapdoor scraped. Lila came up first, face pale, Maggie limp in her arms. Clara hauled Jonah out. Noah followed, shaking so hard his teeth clicked. Harlan heard it. His head snapped, triumph sharp as a blade. There! The front door slammed again. A crack split the frame. Ethan snatched his rifle from the wall, not to shoot through the door and start a war in a room full of children, but to buy time with the threat of it. He backed toward the rear, hurting them like he was pushing his own heart out of the cabin. "Go," he said. Lila's eyes locked on him. Her voice wasn't a whisper anymore. "You're coming." "I'm right behind you." Clara ran first into the snow. Jonah stumbled after her, silent terror in his eyes. Noah clung to Lila's shirt, and Lila stumbled once under Maggie's weight but kept moving, jaw clenched like she decided she would not break in front of children again. Ethan shoved the back door open and pushed them out into the wind. The front door exploded inward. Harlan's shout sliced through the cabin. "After them!" Ethan stepped out and slammed the back door. A gunshot cracked. Pain tore across Ethan's shoulder, hot and sudden, like someone had driven a branding iron under his skin. His breath vanished. For a second, the world tilted white. He didn't fall. Falling was permission. He staggered, caught himself on the doorframe, and forced his legs to move. Lila turned, eyes wide. "Ethan, run!" he rasped. Another shot barked from the cabin. Snow jumped near Clara's feet. Ethan yanked Noah by the coat and shoved him forward. "Don't stop!" Lila's hands hovered, helpless between the children and Ethan's blood. Then she saw his eyes, clear, furious, begging her to be the wall now. Ethan thrust the rifle toward her. "Take it!" Lila flinched as if the wood burned. You can," Ethan said. "If anyone grabs a child, shoot." Lila swallowed hard. Her fingers closed around the rifle, her chin lifted. "I will." They plunged into the tree line, cottonwoods and scrub, snow up to their calves, breath burning. Maggie moaned once, fever dreaming, and Lila tightened her hold, murmuring steady words. No pleading, no whispering, just steadiness. Behind them, hooves hammered, men mounting fast, Harlan barking orders like he owned the air. Ethan forced them toward Miller's Creek, because water stole tracks and sound. The ice cracked under their weight. Clara squealed in fear, and Ethan grabbed her collar, dragging her across before the panic could swallow her. "Keep moving," he said through clenched teeth. His shoulder throbbed with every step, warm blood soaking his shirt under the cold. Noah stumbled on the far bank, sobbing without sound, like his body remembered the rule about crying. Lila dropped to one knee, grabbed his face gently, and made him look at her. "Breathe," she said, firm. "With me." Noah gulped air. One breath, another. He nodded, terrified, but trying. Ethan heard the riders hit the creek behind them, ice groaning, horses snorting, close, too close. Lila glanced back once, eyes shining with rage. That was your home. Ethan didn't look back. He couldn't afford the grief. It was a roof. "And now?" she demanded, voice shaking but loud. Ethan shoved them deeper into the trees, where the branches tangled like fists and the world narrowed to survival. "Now," he said, "it's a trail." Snow came down harder after noon, thick as ash, swallowing the world until the trees were just dark smudges and the sky was the same color as bruises. The cottonwoods gave them cover, but they also boxed them in, branches clawing at coats, drifts pulling at boots like hands. Ethan kept them moving on stubborn instinct alone. His left shoulder had gone stiff and burning, blood drying into his shirt and freezing at the edges. Every few minutes his breath snagged like he'd swallowed glass. He refused to show it. Lila saw anyway. She shifted Maggie higher on her hip, the girl limp and hot, and walked closer behind Ethan so she could catch him if he dropped. Noah stayed glued to her, one bandaged hand still wrapped in cloth, the other clutching her sleeve. Clara shoved Jonah forward when his feet started to drag, muttering through her teeth, "Don't you quit now. Don't you dare." Jonah didn't answer. He never did. But he kept moving, eyes wide and empty in that way that meant he was somewhere else, somewhere safer in his head. Behind them, the world wasn't quiet. Even with snow, you could hear pursuit if you knew how to listen. Not hoofbeats anymore, too loud for men who wanted to catch living people, but the faint snap of branches, the thin, distant call of a man trying to sound calm. "Sheriff's got lawful right. Come out and it'll go easy." Easy, like a lie told sweet. Ethan lifted his hand once, and the group flattened behind a fallen trunk. Everyone held their breath. The only sound was Maggie's weak whimper and the wind worrying at the trees. Lila pressed her mouth to Maggie's forehead. "Stay with me," she whispered, not out of fear now, but out of stubborn love she'd never planned to have. Ethan's eyes swept the woods ahead. He pointed toward a low place where the trees thinned and the land dipped. "There's a line camp," he said. The words were tight, forced through pain. "Used to be. Might still be." Clara frowned. "What's a line camp?" "A place men sleep when they're too poor for town," Ethan said, "or too unwanted." Lila's jaw tightened. "Like us." Ethan didn't argue. He just got up and moved again, pushing them downhill. The farther they went, the more the world smelled of smoke and old livestock. A creek ran somewhere under the ice, making a hollow gurgle. And then the wind shifted, and Ethan caught the scent of wood fire, stronger, fresh, real, close. He slowed, raised a fist. Ahead, tucked in the fold of land half hidden behind willows, was a scatter of canvas and rough boards. Not a real settlement, just a stubborn stain of life on the white. A few lean horses stood with heads low. A pot hung over a fire. Shapes moved in the snow, hunched against the weather. People looked up when Ethan stepped out of the trees. Not townsfolk, no clean coats, no polished boots. Faces wind-burned and hungry. Men with broken noses, women with hands like rope. A couple teenagers with eyes too old. Everyone in that camp looked like the territory had chewed them and decided they were still useful for labor. A man rose from beside the fire, big shoulders under a patched coat. He held a hatchet, not a rifle. His posture said, "We've been robbed before, and we'll do it again if we have to." "Who the hell are you?" the man called. Ethan kept his voice even. "Not trouble, just cold." The man's gaze slid to the kids, to Maggie limp on Lila's hip, to Ethan's darkened sleeve. "You're bleeding," the man said. Ethan shrugged like it was nothing. "Looks worse than it is," the man snorted. "That's what dying men say." Lila took a half-step forward before Ethan could. She lifted her chin, voice clear, not whispering even as the wind tried to steal her words. "We need shelter," she said. "The little one's sick. The boy's hands are frostbit. We've got men behind us who'll drag these children back into chains." The camp went still. A few heads turned sharply, like they hadn't heard the word chains spoken out loud in years. A woman near the fire stood up slow, wiping her hands on her skirt. She was older, hair threaded with gray, eyes sharp as tacks. When she spoke, her voice had the flat certainty of someone who'd buried too many people. "Crane?" she asked. Lila's throat tightened. "Yes." The big man with the hatchet spat into the snow. "That bastard again." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "You know him. Everybody knew him, but not everybody admitted it." The older woman stepped closer, looking Lila over like she was reading bruises through fabric. Her eyes flicked to Noah's bandaged hand, then to Maggie's flushed face. "You keep talking like that in town, you'll get yourself killed," the woman said, not unkind. "But out here? Out here, truth's the only coin worth something." She reached for Maggie without asking. Lila stiffened. The woman paused, met Lila's eyes. "I'm not taking her. I'm helping her. You want to stay holding her, or you want her breathing by morning?" Lila's arms shook. She lowered Maggie into the woman's hands like it cost her pride and her fear in equal measure. The woman cradled the child with practiced steadiness. "Name?" "Maggie," Lila said. The woman nodded, as if making a promise with her mouth. "I'm Ada." The big man lifted his chin toward Ethan. "Name?" "Ethan Rourke." The man's eyes narrowed. "Rourke, you the one who used to ride for the Barstow outfit?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Used to?" "That was a long time ago," the man muttered. Then, grudging, "I'm Cole." Ethan nodded once. "Cole." Cole looked past Ethan into the trees behind them. "You got riders on you?" "Yes," Ethan said. Cole glanced at the others in the camp. "How many?" "4 earlier," Ethan replied. "More by now." Cole's mouth twisted. "Sheriff's dogs." Ada didn't waste breath. "Get them under canvas, now." 2 women moved fast, pulling back a flap on the biggest tent. It wasn't warm, but it was windless, and windlessness could save lives. Lila herded the kids inside. Clara grabbed Jonah's wrist and yanked him after her, muttering, "You hear that? We ain't dying today." Noah stumbled in last, eyes still hunting corners. Ethan took 1 step toward the tent, and the ground tilted. His knees buckled. Lila caught him with her free arm, grunting under his weight. For a second, she looked like she wanted to curse him for collapsing now. Then, she set her jaw and dragged him anyway. "I said you were coming with us," she hissed in his ear. "Don't you dare leave me holding this alone." Ethan tried to laugh and turned it into a cough. "Yes, ma'am." Inside the tent, the air smelled of damp wool, smoke, and the sour edge of sickness, still better than snow. Ada laid Maggie on a pile of blankets near the fire pit just outside, then pushed into the tent with a small satchel. "Where's the blood?" she demanded. Ethan tried to wave it off. "Just a graze." Ada gave him a look like she'd seen too many men die from just. Shirt off. Lila froze, eyes flicking away, then back, then away again. Her body went tense like she expected this to turn into something else. Ethan saw it. Even half dizzy, he saw it. He kept his voice calm, rough with honesty. Lila, turn around if you want. Lila's jaw clenched. I'm not afraid of skin. But she was. She was afraid of what skin had meant in other rooms. She stepped behind Clara and Noah instead, making herself useful. Noah, sit. Let me see your fingers again. Clara, keep Jonah near you. If he bolts, he'll get lost. Clara lifted her chin like she'd been waiting for orders that weren't cruelty. I got him. Ada sliced Ethan's shirt open at the shoulder with a small knife. The wound wasn't deep, but it was angry and dirty, the bullet having kissed him hard enough to tear flesh and leave grit. Ethan hissed through his teeth. Ada pressed a rag into the cut and Ethan's vision sparkled white. He braced his good hand on the tent pole, refusing to fold. You're stubborn, Ada said. Ethan's voice came out thin. Keeps me alive, Ada snorted, or gets you killed. Hold still. Outside, Cole's voice rose low. Orders, people moving, snow packed down with feet. The camp wasn't panicking, it was preparing. Lila knelt by Noah and unwrapped his hands carefully. The skin was redder now, less purple, still swollen. Noah watched her face like he was trying to decide if pain was allowed. It hurts, he whispered. I know, Lila said. Her voice shook once, then steadied. But it means you're still here. Noah swallowed. They said I don't belong to me. Lila's breath caught. She lowered her forehead to his for a second, gentle. Listen to me. You belong to you. And until you're old enough to say it loud, you belong with me. Noah's eyes filled. He blinked hard. Can I talk? Lila glanced at Ethan across the tent. Ethan met her gaze. You can always talk, Ethan said, voice hoarse. Anybody tells you different, they answer to me. Noah took that in like a new law. Then he nodded, small and fierce. Clara shifted beside Jonah. He won't talk, she said, almost angry about it. He just looks. Lila turned her head. That's all right, she said softly. He doesn't owe us words. Not yet. Jonah's fingers tightened around the chipped spoon. His eyes flicked to Lila's face for the first time, quick as lightning, then down again. But it happened. A crack in the wall. Ada finished cleaning Ethan's wound and packed it with salve. You'll live, she pronounced. But you'll hurt, and if you act like you're fine, I'll slap you. Ethan's mouth pulled into something like a smile. Fair. Ada wrapped him tight with cloth, knots quick and sure. Now, tell me what you're carrying, she said, nodding toward Lila's shirt hem where the oilcloth bundle had been hidden before. Because Crane doesn't chase nothing for sport. Lila stiffened. The bundle was in her pocket now, pressed to her ribs like a second heart. Ethan answered for her, calm and blunt. Papers, deed, proof. Cole pushed into the tent, snow clinging to his beard. Crane's proof don't mean nothing in town, he said, not with Sheriff McCall taking his supper. Ethan's eyes sharpened. McCall's sheriff now? Cole's laugh had no humor. Been for a year. Used to be decent. Then Crane put a new roof on his house and a new ring on his wife's finger, and now McCall's decent like a snake is. Ada's gaze bored into Lila. What did Crane do to you? Lila's fingers curled hard enough to hurt. She looked like she wanted to swallow the story back down. Then she lifted her chin. He tried to sell me, she said, not dramatic, not pleading, just facts, flat as stone. And he sells children into labor, into the mine camp. A low murmur rippled through the tent. Not surprise, recognition. Like everyone had heard the rumor and hated hearing it named. Cole's jaw worked. Mine camp up north, he muttered. I worked it once. Men die there. Boys don't last. Noah's shoulders hunched as if the words were a whip. Ethan's voice dropped. That's where they were taking him. Cole looked at Noah, then away, shame crawling across his face. I seen wagons, he admitted. Kids in chains, sheriff escorts. Town pretends it's work placement. Lila's eyes burned. How do they pretend that? Cole spread his hands, helpless. Same way they pretend a beating is discipline. Same way they pretend hunger is God's will. Folks like their comfort more than they like truth. Ada leaned closer to Lila. You want to fight Crane? You don't do it alone. You do it loud. You do it where there are witnesses who can't be bought cheap. Lila swallowed. Where? Ada's eyes narrowed in thought. Cheyenne's too far with kids and snow. But there's a circuit judge due in Rawlins in a week. Lawyers come in for filings. Railroad men pass through. Outsiders. Ethan's heartbeat steadied. A place where Crane's reach wasn't absolute. Cole snorted. If Crane hears you're heading there, he'll cut you off. Ada's mouth tightened. He might already know. Sheriff's men talk. Telegraph talks. Lila's face went pale. Then we have no time. Ethan's gaze held hers. We never did. Lila looked down at Noah, then at Jonah, then at Clara, trying to look tough while her hands shook. She looked at Maggie, breathing shallow on the blankets, fever rattling through her little body. And then she looked at Ethan, bandaged, bleeding, still sitting upright, like pain wasn't allowed to touch him. You said I was safe on your trail, she said. Ethan's voice was quiet. You are. But safe doesn't mean still. Lila's throat worked. I can't carry them all. Ethan shifted, grimaced, and forced himself to his feet. You won't, he said. We carry each other. Ada stepped back, eyes scanning them like she was measuring whether hope was worth spending on. Finally, she nodded once. You sleep here tonight, she ordered. You move at first light. Cole knows a cut through the hills that'll hide you from the main road, and I'm coming with you as far as the ridge. Cole frowned. Ada's eyes flashed. I've buried 2 boys this winter. I'm not burying another because I was scared of a ranchman. The tent went quiet. Lila stared at Ada like she'd never seen a grown woman choose danger on purpose. Her voice came out smaller than she meant. Why would you help us? Ada's answer was simple, tired, and deadly honest. Because nobody helped me when I needed it. And I don't want that kind of world anymore. That landed in Lila's chest like a new kind of fire. Outside, the wind picked up again. Snow slapped the canvas. Somewhere beyond the willows, a dog barked, distant, searching. Cole stepped out, scanning the white. If they're following close, they'll be sniffing for smoke. Ada shoved him toward the flap. Then keep the fire low and the horses quiet. Ethan sank back down onto a blanket, breathing through pain like it was a job. Lila sat beside him, close enough to catch him if he swayed, far enough that her body still felt like it had space. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of kids breathing, the tiny crackle of restrained fire, and the storm trying to erase them. Then Lila's voice came, barely above the wind, not whispering, just soft. When I asked to ride with you, she said, eyes on the tent wall, I didn't think you'd say yes. I thought the snow would take us and it would be quieter than what he had planned. Ethan's jaw tightened. And then I spoke. Lila swallowed. Her eyes shone, but she didn't let tears fall. You told me I didn't have to whisper, she said. And I hated you for it for a second. Because if it was that easy, if it was always that easy, then why did I spend so long living like my voice was a crime? Ethan's gaze stayed on her, steady. It wasn't easy, he said. It was just true. Lila nodded once, as if sealing something inside herself. Then she reached for Noah's hand and held it in both of hers, warming it. We leave at first light, she said. Ethan's mouth tightened with approval. First light, Clara shifted in her blanket, eyes half open. We going somewhere? She asked, voice small under the tuff. Lila looked at her, then at Jonah, then at the sleeping Maggie. Her voice was clear enough for all of them to hear. We're going somewhere they can't pretend we don't exist, she said, and nobody's taking you back. Noah's eyes widened. Promise? Lila held his gaze. Promise, she said, like the word finally belonged to her. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, not to sleep, just to steady himself, while the storm raged outside and inside the tent, a family that wasn't supposed to exist began to take shape anyway. First light in winter didn't arrive like a sunrise. It arrived like a pale verdict. The storm had eased, leaving the world clean and treacherous, fresh snow hiding old ice, silence hiding pursuit. In the camp, people moved with the grim efficiency of those who'd been hungry too long to waste motion. Cole had their horses saddled before the sky even finished turning gray. Ada pressed a tin cup of something bitter into Ethan's hand. Drink. Ethan sniffed it. That ain't coffee. Ada's eyes didn't soften. No. It's willow and molasses and whatever God left me that still fights fever. Drink. He did. It burned down his throat and settled in his stomach like a rock. Lila stood just outside the tent, wrapping Clara and Jonah in extra cloth, tying knots with fingers that still trembled sometimes. Only now she didn't hide it. Noah hovered close, watching everything, his bandaged hands held up like they belonged to somebody else. Cole came up, voice low. We don't take the main road. We cut through the hills, hit the coach road farther east. There's a stage stop by the old sawmill. If we get there before noon, we can blend. Blend with what? Clara muttered. Cole's mouth twisted. With folks who can pretend they don't see you. Lila glanced down at the children, then up at Ethan. We're really doing this. Ethan shifted his shoulder under the bandage and hid the flinch. We're already doing it. Ada stepped close to Lila, adjusting Maggie's blanket where the girl lay in a crude sling against Lila's chest. Maggie's fever had broken sometime in the night. Her breathing was still shallow, but it was steady. Ada's voice dropped. If you have to speak in front of men with money, don't ask permission. Don't shrink. If you give them a crack, they'll crawl through it. Lila swallowed. Her eyes were tired, but there was something new there. I won't whisper. Ada nodded once, as if that was the only prayer worth hearing. Then she handed Lila a small bundle. Salt, needles, a strip of clean cloth, and this, she pressed a folded scrap of paper into Lila's palm. Name and address, a lawyer in Rawlins. He owes me. Don't ask why. Lila stared at the paper like it was a lifeline. Ada, go, Ada cut in, before I change my mind and get sensible. Cole swung up on his horse and motioned the others forward. Ethan lifted Jonah onto his saddle behind him, careful, steady. Jonah didn't resist, but his body stayed rigid, like he didn't trust the sky not to fall. Clara climbed up on Cole's spare horse with the stiff pride of a kid trying to be bigger than her fear. Noah stayed beside Lila, one hand on her sleeve, the other clenched tight. Ethan watched the tree line once more. Nothing moved, and that scared him more than motion. They rode. The hills were a slow grind. White slopes, dark rock, scrub poking through like broken teeth. Their horses labored through drifts while the wind cut sideways, trying to peel skin from bone. Cole kept them in the shallowest draws, where tracks were harder to spot from a ridge. Every so often he stopped and listened, head angled like a man hearing ghosts. Noah's voice came small from beside Lila. Are they still coming? Lila didn't sugar it. Yes. Noah's face tightened. Will they take me? Lila held his gaze. Not if I'm breathing. Ethan heard it and felt something in his chest tighten. Approval, grief, gratitude, all tangled. He rode a little closer to her, just enough that his horse could nudge hers if she swayed. By mid-morning, the cut in the hills opened, and a rough track appeared, wider than a wagon rut packed by winter traffic. In the distance, half buried in snow, stood the warped skeleton of an old sawmill and a shack with a sign that swung crooked in the wind. Stage stop. Cole raised a fist. There, they approached slow. Smoke rose from a chimney, thin, careful smoke, a place trying not to advertise. A man came out onto the porch, wiping hands on his pants. He stared at them for a long second, eyes narrowing on the children. Cole called out first, loud enough to sound casual. Morning, Hank. The man's gaze flicked to Cole. Recognition loosened his posture by a hair. Cole swung down. Need to buy passage. Stage coming today? Hank's eyes stayed on Noah and Maggie. Stage comes when it comes. He spat into the snow and lowered his voice. Who are they? Cole's jaw worked. Cold people. Hank snorted. All people are cold. His gaze slid to Ethan's shoulder bandage. That kind of cold brings trouble. Ethan dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. We pay. Hank's expression didn't change. Pay, don't stop bullets. Lila stepped forward then, chin up, voice clear. How many on the stage? Hank looked at her like he didn't like being addressed by a woman who sounded sure of herself. Then he saw the raw truth in her eyes, and for a second, something like discomfort passed through him. 2 passengers already, he said. Couple railroad men. Might be room if the driver's in a good mood. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out coins, more than he wanted to part with. He placed them in Hank's hand without letting Hank touch him. Hank weighed them, eyes flicking up. That buys you a bench, not sympathy. We're not buying sympathy, Ethan said. Just distance, Hank grunted. Then you picked the right world. They waited inside the shack, where the air smelled of wet wool and bitter coffee. A stove burned low in the corner. Two men in railroad coats sat at a table, boots up, talking over a folded map. They looked up when Ethan's group entered. One of them, a thick-necked man with a mustache, smirked. Well now, family outing? Cole didn't answer. Clara's shoulders tightened. Lila guided the children to the far wall, keeping them between her body and the room like she'd been born doing it. Noah sat close to Maggie, staring at the stove like fire was something sacred and dangerous. The other railroad man, older, eyes tired, watched them with something closer to concern than judgment. His gaze lingered on Noah's bandaged hands. You kids get into some trouble? He asked, not unkind. Noah looked at Lila. Lila answered without begging. Winter trouble. The older man nodded like he understood that kind. He reached into his coat pocket and slid a small piece of hard candy across the table. Quiet, no performance. Noah stared at it like it was a trap. The man didn't push. It's just sugar, son. Take it or don't. Noah's fingers twitched. Slowly, he reached and grabbed it, hiding it in his palm instead of eating it. Ownership mattered more than sweetness. Outside, bells on harness jingled. Approach. The stagecoach rolled into view like a battered beast, 6 horses straining, driver hunched in fur, wheels chewing snow. The driver pulled to a stop hard, cursing at the cold like it was personally insulting him. About time, Hank called. The driver spat. Snow's thick and my horses ain't saints. His eyes swept the shack doorway and landed on the children. His face tightened immediately. No, Ethan stepped forward. We paid. Don't care, the driver snapped. Kids make noise. Noise brings wolves. No, Lila said, calm and sharp. Men bring wolves. The driver stared at her, taken aback that she'd spoken like that. Then his eyes narrowed. Lady, I don't know you and I don't want to. Get off my business. Ethan's voice stayed even. We'll be quiet. The driver leaned forward, smelling trouble. Quiet don't matter when a sheriff's posting notices. Cole went still. What notices? The driver's mouth pulled into a mean grin. Runaway girl, stolen boy, sheriff's offering a reward. Folks are talking. Folks like money. Lila's body stiffened, but her voice didn't shake. And folks like to sleep at night, too. The driver's grin faltered. Get in, he muttered finally, jerking his chin toward the coach. Bench only. No crying, no mess. Lila didn't thank him. She climbed first, pulling Noah up, then helping Clara and Jonah. Ethan boosted Maggie's small weight carefully so she wouldn't jolt. Ethan climbed last, seating himself at the edge where he could see out both sides. The coach lurched forward, wheels groaning, horses snorting steam. As they left the stage stop behind, Hank stayed on the porch watching them with the expression of a man who'd just sold someone else's peace. The road tightened into a corridor of trees, then opened into a wide stretch of flatland, white fields broken by fence lines and low hills. The driver cracked his whip not to punish, but to keep the horses from slowing. Inside, the coach rocked. Jonah's head knocked lightly against the wall. He didn't make a sound. Clara's eyes stayed on the window slit, scanning like she expected a hand to reach in. Noah pressed his forehead to the glass, watching the snow race by. Lila sat straight, arms around Maggie, breathing measured. Every time the coach hit a rut and jolted, she tightened her hold like she could keep the whole world from shaking apart. Ethan leaned closer, voice low. How's the fever? Lila touched Maggie's cheek, still warm, but not burning. Good. Lila's eyes slid toward Ethan's shoulder. And you? Ethan gave her the truth in the smallest possible dose. Still standing, she didn't smile. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. The older railroad man shifted across from them. You folks headed to Rollins? He asked quietly. Cole answered before anyone else could. Passing through. The man's gaze moved to the kids again. Sheriff's notice. It says the boy's taken from lawful guardianship. Noah's body went rigid. Lila's voice stayed calm. The notice is a lie, the mustached railroad man snorted. Sheriff don't lie. Sheriff's the law. Ethan's eyes turned cold. Sheriff's a man with a badge. Badges can be bought. The mustached man bristled. Careful, stranger. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Careful's why those kids behind the saloon keep working while clean folks sing hymns. Silence fell inside the coach like a dropped stone. The older railroad man looked away first, shame flickering. The mustached man's mouth twisted, but he didn't answer, because the truth had weight, and weight hurt. The driver shouted from the front, "Checkpoint ahead!" Ethan's spine tightened. Cole's hand drifted toward his coat. Lila's fingers curled around Maggie's blanket. Noah looked up, eyes wide. Through the window slit, Ethan saw a crude gate across the road, 2 posts and a chain, a deputy's horse tied nearby. A second man stood beside a barrel, rifle resting casual on his shoulder like it was part of his body. The coach slowed. The deputy approached with the swagger of someone who'd never been hungry a day in his life. He peered into the driver's face first, then tapped the side of the coach with his knuckles. "Morning," he drawled. "Sheriff says to inspect all traffic." The driver spat. "Inspect what? Snow?" The deputy's grin sharpened. "Inspect passengers." Ethan's pulse stayed steady by force. He shifted slightly so his body blocked Noah's face from the deputy's angle. The deputy climbed a step and leaned in, eyes scanning. They lingered on the kids immediately. "Well, well," he murmured, "we got ourselves some young ones." The mustached railroad man laughed nervously. "Just families, deputy." The deputy's gaze slid to Lila and stopped. Ethan felt it, the way the air changes when a predator recognizes what it wants. Lila didn't shrink. She lifted her chin and met the deputy's eyes like she was daring him to say her name. The deputy's smile went slow. "Ma'am, you look like someone I've seen on paper." Ethan's voice stayed mild. "We've all got faces." The deputy ignored him. "Sheriff's been real concerned about a missing ward," he said, eyes still on Lila. "Young woman. Might be hurt. Might be misled." Lila's mouth didn't move much, but her words were clear. "I'm not hurt, and I'm not misled." The deputy's smile flickered. "That so?" Ethan watched the man's hand, watched the way it rested too close to his holster. "We're on a schedule," Ethan said. "Let the coach pass." The deputy's eyes slid to Ethan at last. Recognition sparked. Town memory. "Rourke," he said, pleased. "Sheriff said you might be traveling." Ethan didn't react. "Sheriff talks too much." The deputy's grin widened. "Sheriff pays good for information." Then, almost casually, the deputy leaned farther in and reached toward Noah. Noah jerked back instinctively, eyes huge, his bandaged hands clenched. Lila's body moved without permission. She snapped her arm out and slapped the deputy's hand away. A sharp sound in the cramped coach. The deputy blinked, surprised. Then his face hardened. "That," he said softly, "was a mistake." Lila didn't whisper. "Touch him again and I'll break your fingers." The mustached railroad man choked on a laugh like he couldn't believe a woman had spoken that way. The older railroad man went pale. The deputy's eyes flashed with anger, and with certainty. "You just confirmed it," he said. "Sheriff's ward don't talk like that unless she's been filled with poison." Ethan shifted forward, voice low and controlled. "Step down." The deputy's gaze cut to Ethan. "Or what?" Ethan held his stare. "Or you get hurt and you don't have enough men here to make it look like an accident." For a beat, the deputy looked like he might draw. Then, the second man by the barrel lifted his rifle slightly, not aiming, but ready. The deputy's smile returned, thin and ugly. "Well," he said, "guess we'll do this proper. Everyone out." The driver cursed. "This is nonsense." The deputy ignored him. "Out," he repeated louder, "unless you want your coach impounded." Cole moved first, stepping down into the snow, hands visible. Clara followed, jaw tight. Jonah stumbled out, silent, eyes darting. The railroad men climbed down too, grumbling. Lila tightened Maggie's sling and started to rise. Ethan leaned in, voice a thread meant only for her. "Keep your eyes on the kids, don't let them separate you." Lila nodded once. She stepped down into the cold, Noah right beside her. The deputy walked a slow circle like he was inspecting livestock. "Line up," he ordered. They lined. Snow blew across their boots, horses stamped, the coach creaked. The driver muttered curses into his beard. The deputy stopped in front of Lila and Noah, too close. "Boy," he said, voice syrupy, "come here." Noah froze. Lila's hand clamped on his shoulder. "He stays with me." The deputy's smile hardened. "Sheriff's paper says he doesn't." Ethan stepped forward then, calm as a funeral. "You're not taking him." The deputy turned, eyes bright. "Oh, I'm not? You planning to shoot a deputy over a child that ain't yours?" Ethan's voice didn't change. "I'm planning to keep a child alive." The deputy laughed softly. "That's sweet. Stupid, but sweet." He lifted his hand and snapped his fingers at the second man. The second man whistled, a sharp signal. From the tree line behind the checkpoint, riders appeared. 3, then 4, then more, fanning out like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. Ethan's stomach went cold. Cole swore under his breath. Clara's eyes widened. Jonah's body went rigid. Noah grabbed Lila's sleeve so hard his knuckles went white through the bandage. The deputy's grin widened into triumph. "Sheriff said to stall if I saw you," he murmured. "Said he'd send friends." Among the riders, Ethan spotted the ranch hand's coat, Crane's brand, and beside him, a man with pale eyes, Harlan. He rode up slow, enjoying the way fear changed the air. "Well," Harlan called, "look what the snow dragged in." Lila's face drained of color. She didn't step back. But Ethan felt the tremor in the hand on Noah's shoulder. Harlan slid down from his horse and approached like he owned the road. He tipped his hat at Lila with false courtesy. "Miss Hart, we've been worried sick." Lila's voice was steady. "Liar," Harlan chuckled. Now, don't be ungrateful." His eyes flicked to Noah. "And there's the boy," Noah whimpered, a small sound he tried to swallow. Ethan stepped between Harlan and the children. "This ends here." Harlan looked at Ethan's bandage. "Looks like you're already bleeding for them. That's touching." Ethan's hand hovered near his coat, not for a gun he didn't want to use in front of kids, but for the knife that felt more honest. "You don't get them," Harlan smiled, then nodded once as if granting a wish. "Sure." Then he spoke louder, for the driver, the railroad men, the deputies, witnesses he could later twist. "Sheriff's warrant," he announced, "authorizes us to retrieve stolen property and a ward taken under duress." Lila's chin lifted. "I was not taken. I ran." Harlan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course you did. They always say that after they've been confused." The mustached railroad man shifted uncomfortably. The older one looked sick, like he knew exactly what he was watching and hated himself for standing still. Ethan's gaze cut to the older railroad man. "You gonna help?" he asked, blunt. The man's throat bobbed, his eyes flicked to the rifles, to Harlan's men, to the badge, to his own hands, empty. He looked away. That answer hurt more than a punch. Harlan lifted a hand and 2 of Crane's riders moved around, flanking, not rushing, just closing the circle. Cole's jaw tightened. He murmured to Ethan without moving his lips. "Too many." Ethan knew. He felt it like weather. He had kids behind him, 1 sick child, a wounded shoulder. 1 wrong move and the snow would turn red. Harlan stepped closer, voice dropping to a private cruelty. "We can do this easy, Rourke. Give us the girl and the boy. The others are unfortunate, but not on paper." Lila's breath hitched. "The others are children," Harlan shrugged. "Children are a problem that grows." Ethan's vision narrowed. His hand flexed. He wanted to break Harlan's throat with his bare hands, but breaking 1 man didn't break a system, and if he died here, the kids died later. Slow. He forced himself to think like a man who'd survived too long to be brave for fun. Ethan took a half-step back, as if surrendering space. Harlan's eyes glittered. "That's right." Then Ethan moved. He shoved his shoulder, his good shoulder, into Harlan hard enough to knock him sideways, and at the same time, he grabbed Noah and yanked him behind his own body. Cole reacted instantly, slamming into the nearest deputy. Clara screamed, high, raw, not helpless, but angry. In the confusion, Lila spun, clutching Maggie, grabbing Jonah's wrist with her free hand. "Run!" she shouted. The coach driver yelled, "What in God's—" A rifle cracked. Snow jumped at Ethan's feet. Ethan shoved Jonah toward Clara. "Take him!" Clara grabbed Jonah and ran without thinking, dragging him like a lifeline. Another shot. A horse screamed. Men shouted over each other. Bad orders, angry curses, the sharp bark of command. Ethan saw an opening, thin, desperate, and he shoved Noah toward Lila. "Go with her!" Noah stumbled into Lila's side. Lila bolted toward the shallow ditch beside the road, Maggie bouncing in her sling, her arms wrapped around the child like a shield. She yanked Noah with her, hauling him over frozen grass. They made it 3 steps. A rider came down hard from the flank, horse cutting in, body leaning. A gloved hand shot out and grabbed Lila's braid, yanking her head back viciously. Lila cried out, not a whisper, not a plea, a furious, pained sound. Noah screamed then, a real scream, and tried to claw at the rider's arm. Ethan lunged. Harlan caught him from behind, locking an arm around Ethan's throat, dragging him back. Ethan drove his elbow into Harlan's ribs. Harlan grunted, but didn't release. "Got you," Harlan hissed in Ethan's ear. "Hero!" Lila fought like a wild thing. She slammed her elbow into the rider's chest. She kicked, she bit. Maggie started crying weakly, startled by the violence. The rider cursed and yanked harder, trying to haul Lila up onto the saddle like she weighed nothing. Lila twisted at the last second and shoved Maggie toward the ground, careful, controlled, into the snow beside Noah. "Noah, hold her!" Lila shouted. Noah dropped to his knees, grabbed Maggie's sling straps, sobbing as he tried to keep her from sliding. Lila reached for Noah with one hand, trying to pull him with her. Another rider grabbed Lila's arm. 2 hands now, 2 men. They ripped her away from the children. Lila's fingers slipped off Noah's sleeve. "No!" she screamed, voice tearing through the air like something that had been trapped too long. "Noah!" Ethan roared and surged, pure violence in his body. He broke Harlan's hold by sheer force, spun, and drove his fist into Harlan's jaw. Harlan stumbled, spitting blood. Ethan charged toward Lila. A rifle butt slammed into Ethan's ribs from the side. Pain exploded. His breath vanished. He still kept moving. 1 step, 2. A second blow caught him across the shoulder bandage, and the world went white for half a heartbeat. He fell to one knee. He looked up through blur and snow and saw Lila hauled across a saddle like a sack of grain, hair loose, face streaked, eyes locked on the children as if she could hold them with her gaze. She didn't beg. She didn't whisper. She shouted, hoarse and fierce, the last thing she could give them. "Don't let them take you back!" Then the rider kicked his horse, and Lila vanished into the moving line of men and snow. Ethan's hands clenched in the drifts. His chest heaved. His mouth tasted like iron. Noah was on the ground, screaming, holding Maggie, while Clara dragged Jonah toward the ditch, crying and cursing all at once. Cole grabbed Ethan's arm, yanking him up. "Ethan, move!" Ethan's eyes tracked the riders disappearing over the rise, tracks cut deep in fresh snow, clear as a map to hell. He stood, shaking with rage so hard it felt like the ground might crack under him. He looked at the children, he looked at the tracks, and he made a decision with no words at all. Lila woke to warmth that felt wrong. Not the honest warmth of a stove in a poor cabin, earned with split wood and stubborn hands. This warmth was thick, perfumed, padded by rugs and heavy curtains, warmth that existed because other people froze outside it. Her cheek pressed into something coarse. Burlap. Her wrists burned where rope had rubbed skin raw again. When she tried to sit up, pain snapped through her shoulder and a man's hand shoved her back down. "Easy now," a voice murmured, almost gentle. Lila forced her eyes open. A lantern hung above, its light steady and clean. She was on the floor of a tack room, saddles on pegs, bridles shining with oil. 2 ranch hands stood near the door, arms crossed, watching her like she was a stray animal someone had decided to keep. Then a 3rd man stepped into view, and the air changed. Darius Crane didn't look like a monster. Monsters never did when they knew the world was watching. He was clean-shaven, hair neatly combed, coat expensive and fitted like he'd been born in it. He smelled faintly of bay rum and tobacco. His smile was calm, practiced. "Miss Hart," he said, as if greeting her at church, "you've had everyone worried." Lila's throat worked. Her voice came out rough, but it did come out. "You don't get to call me that." Crane's smile widened by a fraction. "Call you what?" "My name," Lila said, "not your property." The ranch hands shifted, annoyed. One of them took a step forward, ready to shut her up. Crane lifted 2 fingers, barely a gesture, and the man stopped. Crane didn't like help. He liked control. Crane crouched slowly until he was level with her, close enough that she could see the pale flecks in his eyes. "You're upset," he said, like he was explaining weather. "I understand. Running does that. It makes a person theatrical." Lila swallowed blood from a split lip she hadn't noticed yet. "Where are the children?" Crane blinked as if she'd asked about cattle. "Which children?" "You know, Lila said, and she felt the rage shake in her bones. The ones you sell. One of the ranch hands laughed. Crane's expression didn't change. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to hit her. Not yet. Miss Hart, Crane said softly, you keep using ugly words, sell, chains, mine. It's very dramatic. The truth is simpler. This territory runs on labor. Everyone works, even children, if they're unclaimed. Unclaimed, Lila repeated, tasting the lie. They have names. Crane stood, dusting off his knee as if she'd dirtied it by existing. Names don't feed them. Work does. Lila tugged at the rope. Her wrists screamed. She didn't whimper. She didn't whisper. Crane watched her struggle inside like a disappointed father. I tried, he said, voice mild. I truly did. I brought medicine to your father. I kept your land from being swallowed by taxes. I offered you safety under my roof until you found a husband and settled down like a proper young woman. You offered a cage, Lila snapped. Crane's smile thinned just enough to show teeth. I offered order. You offered chaos. He nodded toward the door. Bring her inside. The ranch hands hauled her up. Lila's boots dragged on the floor, her shoulder jolting with each tug. She kept her chin up anyway, because she'd learned the price of looking small. They marched her through a hallway with framed landscapes and polished wood, past a parlor with a grand piano, past a dining room table long enough for a dozen men to pretend they were civilized while they ate meat someone else raised. They brought her into Crane's office. It was a shrine to paper, shelves of ledgers, a safe in the wall, a desk heavy enough to stop a bullet. On the desk, a decanter of amber liquor sat beside a plate of sliced apples, like hospitality had never hurt anyone. Crane took his seat. He gestured to a chair across from him. Sit, he said. Lila didn't move. Crane's eyes flicked to the ranch hands. One of them shoved her down into the chair hard enough to knock the air out of her. Lila bit back the sound and straightened slowly, refusing to fold. Crane placed a document on the desk and slid it toward her with one clean finger. Ink, seal, lines for signatures. I'm going to make this easy, Crane said. Sign, and this unpleasantness ends. Lila stared at the paper without touching it. What is it? Crane's voice stayed warm. A simple transfer. You relinquish your claim to your father's parcel. You acknowledge my guardianship was valid. You confirm the boy was taken against the law. You return to my care. In exchange, he lifted his eyebrows as if offering generosity. The boy lives. Lila's stomach clenched. Noah is not a bargaining chip. Crane's smile didn't move. Everything is a bargaining chip, Miss Hart. Even you, especially you. Her hands curled into fists on her lap, nails biting skin. She thought of Noah's scream, of Maggie's small weight, of Clara's fierce eyes, of Jonah's silence like a locked door. Where's Noah? Lila asked, voice low. Crane leaned back. Not here. Lila's breath caught. Where? Crane poured himself a drink. He didn't offer her one. The sheriff has him, he said. For now, he's being delivered to where he belongs. Lila heard her own heartbeat, loud and stupid. The mine camp. Crane took a slow sip. Work makes boys into men. He'll thank you later. Lila's vision narrowed. She forced herself to breathe. And the other children? Crane shrugged. They were never your concern. You made them your concern to feel noble. They're human, Lila said. Crane's eyes cooled. So are wolves. Silence hung between them. Then Crane set his glass down and leaned forward, voice lowering as if confiding. I'm not your enemy, he said. Your enemy is the cold, hunger, the kind of men who would hurt you just to feel powerful. I protect you from that. Lila laughed once, a short sound without humor. You are that kind of man. For the first time, Crane's expression flickered, irritation quick as a lash. Then it smoothed out again. He reached into a drawer and pulled out another paper. A notice, sheriff's seal, a name scrawled beneath it, Ethan Rourke. Crane slid it toward her. Your hero put up a spirited fight, he said lightly, but the snow is unforgiving. So are bullets. Lila didn't look down. She kept her eyes on Crane's face. What did you do to him? Crane spread his hands. I did nothing. I didn't even have to. Your choices did it for me. He tapped the paper with one finger. His horse returned to town alone this morning, saddle bloodied. Folks assumed what folks assume. Sheriff's men found tracks, then they stopped finding tracks. Lila felt the floor tilt. For a second, it was hard to breathe. Ethan. Dead. The word tried to settle in her chest like a stone. Crane watched her carefully, like he was studying whether grief would break her into something useful. Lila did the only thing she could do to survive. She gave him nothing. Her face stayed still. Her voice stayed steady, even as something in her screamed. "You're lying," she said. Crane smiled. "I don't need to lie about a corpse, Miss Hart." Corpses don't argue. Lila's fingers tightened in her lap until pain brought her back. Ethan couldn't be gone. Not like that. Not after telling her she didn't have to whisper. Not after lifting Noah onto a saddle with hands that didn't shake. But denial wouldn't save Noah. Denial wouldn't save Clara, Jonah, Maggie. Crane pushed the pen toward her. "Sign," he said, voice gentle enough to be obscene. "Stop making this harder than it has to be." Lila looked down at the paper now, because she had to. She scanned the lines, the words meant to erase her father, erase her, erase a boy's right to his own life. She lifted her gaze back to Crane. "If I sign," she said, "you'll let Noah go?" Crane's smile was almost kind. "I'll bring him home." Home, the word turned her stomach. "And the other children?" Lila asked. Crane chuckled. "Always the saints, aren't we? You want to save everyone, it's charming." He leaned forward again, voice dropping into something sharper. "Listen carefully. You don't have leverage. You have a body. You have a name on paper. Both belong to me unless you're smart enough to accept reality." Lila held his gaze. Her voice didn't shake. "I want to see Noah." Crane's eyes narrowed. "You'll see him when you sign." Lila's breath left her slow. Then she nodded once like she was conceding. "Then I won't sign," she said quietly. One of the ranch hands stepped forward, furious. "Crane!" Crane lifted his hand again. The man stopped. Crane didn't look at his employee. He looked only at Lila, as if she was a stubborn mare refusing a bridle. "You've grown bold," Crane said softly. "Did that drifter teach you that?" Lila swallowed. The room smelled like apples and ink and power. Crane's voice turned pleasant again. "Perhaps you need time to reconsider." He rose and walked to the door. "Put her in the upstairs room," he said over his shoulder. "No windows open, no visitors, and if she starts screaming, remind her what screaming costs." Lila stood up slowly. "You can lock my body," she said, and she surprised herself with the calm in her own voice. "But you can't lock the truth." Crane paused at the door. He didn't turn fully. "Truth," he murmured, as if amused. "Truth is whatever keeps a town quiet." Then he left. The ranch hands marched her upstairs. The room they shoved her into was clean, furnished, soft, another kind of cruelty. There was a bed with a quilt, a wash basin, a wardrobe. The window was latched tight, the door locked from the outside. Lila stood in the center of the room for a long time, listening to the house breathe. Somewhere below, men laughed. Somewhere outside, horses snorted. And somewhere, Noah was being delivered to hell. She moved to the wardrobe and found a dress laid out like she'd been expected. Her stomach turned. She didn't touch it. She searched instead. Drawers, seams, the underside of the washstand. No knife, no key. They weren't careless, but they were arrogant. Lila went to the wash basin and looked at her reflection in the water. Her lip was split. Her cheek was bruised. Her eyes looked older than they had yesterday. She pressed her fingers to her throat where her voice lived and forced herself to breathe. No whispering, she told herself. Not now. Hours passed in the slow torture of waiting. Near dusk, footsteps approached. The lock clicked. A woman entered carrying a tray. Bread, soup, water, housekeeper, mid-40s, hair pinned tight, eyes down. She set the tray on the table without looking up. Lila spoke gently. "What's your name?" The woman flinched. "Ma'am." "That's not a name." The woman's eyes flicked toward the door, fear sharp. Don't talk to me." "I'm not trying to get you hurt," Lila said. "I'm trying to keep children from dying." That made the woman pause, just for a heartbeat, a crack. Lila lowered her voice, not into a whisper, but into something private. "They're taking boys to the mine. You know that." The woman swallowed. Her hands tightened around the tray cloth. "I don't know anything." Lila nodded slowly. "Then you won't mind telling me where Crane keeps his ledgers?" The woman's eyes snapped up, alarmed. "You'll get killed." Lila met her gaze. Then help me live." The woman stared at her as if measuring the danger. Then, almost imperceptibly, her eyes flicked toward the floor, toward the wall, toward the place where the stairs would be. "The office," she said, barely moving her lips. "He locks it when he sleeps." Lila's chest tightened. "Does anyone have a key?" The woman's voice trembled. "The foreman, Mr. Pruitt." Lila nodded, filing it away. "And the children. Where do they keep them before transport?" The housekeeper's eyes went wet. She blinked hard. "In the old smokehouse by the North Corral," she whispered. Then she looked terrified of her own words. "Please, please don't ask me more." Lila's voice stayed steady. "I won't. Thank you." The woman backed away like she'd stepped near a cliff. At the door, she turned once, eyes full of something like apology. "They said," she murmured, "the drifter. They said he died." Lila didn't move. "Who said?" "The men," the woman whispered. "Sheriff's men. They're downstairs drinking to it." Lila's stomach twisted. She kept her face calm. "Tell me something true." The woman's voice broke. "I don't know what's true anymore." Then she fled and locked the door again. Lila stood alone with a tray of food that tasted like nothing. She forced herself to eat anyway, because hunger was how they made you pliable. She wasn't going to be pliable. When night settled, the house quieted. Footsteps faded. A laugh downstairs died into silence. Somewhere, a door thudded shut. Lila waited until the oil lamp in the hallway dimmed. Then she moved. She took the metal hairpin from the tray cloth, the kind women used to fasten napkins, and tested it in the lock. It wasn't a clean fit, but it was something. She worked slowly, hands steady, listening with her whole body. Click. The lock gave. Lila eased the door open a finger's width. The hallway was dark. She slipped out barefoot, silent as she'd been trained to be. Only now silence was her choice, not her cage. She moved down the corridor, past portraits of men in coats who'd never cleaned their own boots, down the back stairs where servants walked. The air smelled of cigar smoke and spilled liquor. At the bottom, dim light glowed under Crane's office door. Voices inside. 2 men, laughing. Lila froze in shadow and listened. "Told you the horse came back," a man slurred. "Blood on the saddle like a story." Another voice, Pruitt maybe, chuckled. "Crane's pleased. Says the drifter saved us the trouble by bleeding out." Lila's nails dug into her palm. She didn't let the pain show on her face. She didn't let grief make noise. She waited until the laughter faded and the chair legs scraped. The door opened. 2 men stumbled out, drunk, leaving the office dark as they swayed toward the kitchen. Lila moved. She slid into the office and shut the door behind her. Her heart hammered so hard she thought the whole room must hear it. The desk smelled of ink and power. On it lay a ledger, open, numbers and names written in neat columns, children's names, amounts, dates, destinations. Lila's breath caught. She pressed a hand to her mouth, not to silence herself, but to keep from vomiting. Work placement, the town called it. Order, Crane called it. It was a market. Lila's eyes scanned the page, memorizing as fast as she could. Noah's name wasn't there, because Noah wasn't a number yet. Noah was leverage. But Clara's name, no. Jonah's, no. Maggie's, no. Other names, too many. Lila's hands shook. She forced them steady. She couldn't take the whole ledger. Too obvious, too heavy, too easy to miss and then die for. She needed 1 page, 1 sliver of truth sharp enough to cut. She tore a blank scrap from a blotter pad, dipped Crane's pen in ink, and began to write. Not a story, not an accusation, a list. Names, dates, places, the mine camp, the sheriff's escort, Pruitt's signature beside deliveries. She wrote until her fingers cramped. Then she folded the paper tight and slid it into the inside seam of her boot, pressing it down like a secret heartbeat. A sound in the hallway. Floorboard creak. Lila froze, counted breaths. 1, 2. Silence again. She closed the ledger exactly the way it had been, set the pen back where it belonged, and moved to the safe, not to open it, but to listen. Her ear pressed to cold iron, as if truth might hum through it. Nothing. She backed away. At the door, she paused once and looked at the office like it was a battlefield she'd just survived. Crane thought he owned quiet. He didn't. Lila slipped back into the hallway and started up the stairs with the truth hidden against her skin, her jaw set, her voice ready, waiting for the moment she could use it. The first thing Ethan did after they took Lila was keep the children alive. He didn't get the luxury of grief on the road. Grief made you slow. Slow made you dead. Cole shoved Clara and Jonah into the ditch beside the checkpoint while the stage driver screamed and the railroad men scattered like startled birds. Noah clutched Maggie to his chest, sobbing so hard his bandaged hands shook. Ethan staggered to his feet with his ribs screaming and snow in his mouth. Harlan was laughing somewhere behind him, barking orders. "Bring the boy!" a deputy shouted. Ethan's eyes snapped to Noah, small, kneeling in the snow, trying to keep Maggie's head from rolling. "Move!" Ethan roared, and the sound came out like something torn loose. Noah flinched but obeyed. He grabbed Maggie tighter, half dragging her, half carrying, stumbling toward Clara and Jonah. Cole grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "You can't win this on the road." Ethan turned. His gaze locked on the ridge where Lila had disappeared. "I'm not leaving her," Ethan said. Cole's face tightened with the truth. "If you die here, you leave her anyway." That cut through Ethan like a knife because it was right. A rifle cracked again, closer. Snow jumped by Ethan's boot. Ethan's jaw clenched. He nodded once, the decision brutal and clean. "Go." Cole didn't ask questions. He grabbed Clara with one hand, Jonah with the other, and shoved them deeper into the ditch. Ethan yanked Noah and Maggie down behind them, pressing all four bodies into the snowbank like he was hiding his own heart. Hooves thundered past on the road above, men shouting, Harlan calling, irritated now, because nothing angered him like prey that refused to be simple. "Find them." Ethan held his breath until the world hurt. He felt Noah shaking under his hand, felt Clara's shoulders trembling, felt Jonah's rigid silence, felt Maggie's weak, fever-soft whimper. Then the sound shifted. Riders peeling off, searching wider, spreading like rot. Cole whispered, "They'll find tracks." Ethan looked at the ditch, looked at the drift, looked at the creek line that ran under ice 100 yards away. He leaned in close to Cole, voice low. "When I say, you run for the creek, don't stop, don't look back." Cole's eyes flashed. "And you?" Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't afford to give the children a goodbye they'd remember. He waited until the next wave of hoofbeats passed farther out. Then, he shoved Cole forward and hissed, "Now!" Cole moved first, hauling Clara and Jonah up and over the ditch wall. Noah stumbled after, Maggie in his arms. Ethan stayed half a step behind, forcing his wounded body to keep up, forcing his lungs to work. They hit the creek line and the ice groaned under their weight. Clara squealed. Cole clamped a hand over her mouth, not cruel, urgent. Ethan shoved them across where snow had drifted thickest and ice was strongest. When Noah slipped, Ethan grabbed his coat and yanked him upright. Noah's eyes were wild, but he didn't let go of Maggie. They made it into the cottonwoods on the far side. Ethan didn't stop. He didn't slow until the trees swallowed them and the sound of riders became something distant and confused. When they finally collapsed behind a fallen log, Cole bent over, hands on knees, breathing hard. Clara pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from crying loud. Jonah stared at the snow like it was a wall. Noah rocked Maggie gently, whispering broken words into her hair. Ethan stared at the direction Lila had been taken until his eyes burned. "She told us not to go back," Clara rasped, tears freezing on her cheeks. "She told us," Ethan's voice came out flat with pain. "I heard her," Noah's voice broke. "They took her because of me." Ethan's head snapped to the boy. "No," Noah shook. "They wanted me. She. Ethan grabbed Noah's chin, firm, making him look up. "They took her because they're criminals. Don't put their sin on your back." Noah's eyes squeezed shut. He sobbed silently, whole body shaking like he might crack in half. Ethan released him slowly. His hands trembled with rage. He turned to Cole. "Can you get them back to Ada?" Cole's face tightened. "Yes." "Do it," Ethan said. "Keep them hidden. Keep them fed. Don't let anyone separate them, not for water, not for nothing." Cole looked at Ethan's ribs, at his bandage, at the blood that had dried black on his coat. "And you?" Ethan's gaze went hard. "I'm going after her." Cole swallowed. "Alone?" Ethan didn't blink. "No." He stood, pain flaring, and forced himself to walk. Every step hurt. He didn't care. He had one thought, and it wasn't a prayer. It was a promise. You don't have to whisper. He wasn't letting those words die in a locked room. By the time Ethan reached Ada's camp again, night had already started to bleed in. Smoke was low, hidden. Cole arrived from a different angle with the children, like he'd been born knowing how to vanish. Ada saw them and her face changed fast, anger first, then fear, then a hard steadiness. "Where's the girl?" she demanded. Cole's jaw clenched. "Taken!" Ada swore under her breath, low and bitter. She hurried to Noah, checked Maggie's face, pressed fingers to her neck. "Still alive," she muttered, like it was a victory. Noah looked up, eyes red. "Ma'am, Ada? They took Lila." Ada's expression softened for half a second, then hardened again. "I know." Clara's voice shook. "Are you going to get her?" Ada looked at Ethan. "He is." Ethan didn't sit. He didn't drink. He didn't even take his coat off. He crouched by the fire and stared into it like he could burn a plan out of flame. Ada sat across from him, eyes sharp. "Tell me everything." Ethan did. The checkpoint, Harlan, Crane's men. Lila hauled away, the deputy's smugness when he said the sheriff paid for information. Ada listened without interrupting, face like stone. When Ethan finished, the camp was quiet except for Maggie's small breathing and the wind rubbing snow along canvas. Ada leaned forward. "Crane's ranch is 20 miles southeast," she said. "You already know that." Ethan nodded. Ada's gaze cut to the men around the fire, faces that had been beaten down by work and hunger and law. "Crane's been buying people's silence for years," she said. "But silence ain't loyalty, it's fear." A man across the fire shifted. He was lean and gray-eyed, with hands scarred by picks. "You talking about the mine?" he said. Ada nodded. "I'm talking about the mine," the man spat. "They take boys, work 'em till they bleed. If they die, they bury 'em where the snow hides it." Noah heard and curled tighter around Maggie. Clara's jaw clenched like she wanted to bite somebody. Ethan's voice dropped. "Crane's foreman, Pruitt." Ada's eyes narrowed. "You know him?" Ethan didn't, but he'd heard the name from Cole, and he'd learned long ago that names were handles you could grab evil by. "He carries the keys. He runs the dirty work." Another man spoke up, younger, with a bruised cheek and the posture of someone who'd been hit by authority too many times. "Pruitt drinks at Hank's stage stop on Fridays," he said. "Gets loud, talks like he's king." Ada glanced at him. "And who are you?" "Cal," the man said. "I used to work Crane's north fences, until Pruitt decided I owed him for breathing." Ethan's eyes met Cal's. "You want payback?" Cal's mouth tightened. "I want the kids out." That was the first honest thing Ethan had heard all day. Ada looked around the fire, voice steady. "Crane's got money, sheriff's got a badge, but neither one of those stops a man from doing the right thing if he's got enough reason." She pointed toward Noah, toward Maggie, toward Jonah's silent stare. "There's your reason." A few men shifted uncomfortably. One looked away. Another stared into the fire like it had answers. Then a woman stepped forward from the edge of camp, Sarah Whitcomb, preacher's wife, cheeks red from cold, eyes fierce. Ethan's head lifted, surprised. "Mrs. Whitcomb." Sarah didn't waste time on greetings. "The sheriff posted a new notice this afternoon," she said, breath steaming. "Reward doubled. It says the girl is unstable and the boy is stolen property. It says anyone aiding them will be prosecuted." Ada's mouth curled. There it is, paper trying to turn cruelty into law. Sarah's voice shook with anger. "They're also calling Ethan a kidnapper in the church. In my husband's church." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He say anything?" Sarah's eyes flashed. "He prayed." The word landed like an insult. Sarah stepped closer to Ethan, lowered her voice. "I didn't come to pray," she said. "I came to tell you the sheriff's men will be at Crane's ranch tonight, drinking, celebrating." "They think it's finished." Ethan's gaze went hard. "It isn't," Sarah nodded once. "And I came to tell you something else. There's a deputy, Ben Harper. He's been sick over what he's done. He came to me after service and said if anyone ever tried to fight Crane, he'd help." Ada's eyebrows lifted. A deputy with a conscience, imagine that. Sarah met Ethan's eyes. "He knows the ranch layout, where they keep the smokehouse keys, where the boys are held before transport." Ethan's pulse steadied for the first time since the checkpoint. "Bring him." Sarah nodded. "He's waiting by the creek road. He said he wouldn't step into this camp unless you asked. He's afraid of being seen. Ethan stood. Pain flared. He ignored it. Then we ask. Ben Harper looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. He was young, but his eyes were old with shame. When Sarah led him into the firelight, he stopped short and stared at the children. Noah stared back, quiet and sharp. Ben swallowed. "I'm not here to hurt." Ada cut him off. "You already did, so make it right or get out." Ben flinched, but he didn't leave. His gaze went to Ethan's bandage, then to Ethan's face. "You're Rourke," he said. Ethan nodded once. "You know Crane's ranch." Ben's hands tightened. "Too well." Ethan's voice was calm, deadly. "Where is Lila?" Ben looked at the ground. "Main house, upstairs room. Crane keeps his special problems close." Noah made a small sound. Ethan's eyes cut to him. Noah clamped his lips shut, trying to be brave. Ethan leaned in slightly. "Where are the children?" Ben's face tightened. "Smokehouse near the North Corral. When transport day comes, they chain 'em in pairs and load 'em before dawn." Clara's voice snapped. "How many?" Ben hesitated. "Tonight? Maybe 6. Could be more if they caught others." Ada's gaze bored into him. "Keys?" Ben's mouth went dry. "Foreman Pruitt. He wears them on his belt." Ethan nodded slowly. "Where's Pruitt now?" Ben's voice was bitter. "In Crane's office, drinking with Harlan and the sheriff's men. They'll be there until they pass out." Ethan looked around the fire. Ada, Cole, Cal, 2 other men with minor hands, Sarah with her jaw set, Ben with guilt trembling under his skin. "This isn't revenge," Ethan said. "This is extraction." Ada nodded once. "Kids first." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "No killing unless it's the only way to keep a child breathing. You hear me?" Cal's face twisted. "Hard to promise." Ethan's voice went colder. "Promise it anyway, because if we turn into them, we lose before we start." Silence. Then Cal nodded, jaw clenched. "Fine." Ethan turned to Cole. "You stay here with Ada and the children we've got. If anything happens, if we don't come back, you get them to Rollins. You find that lawyer. You show him everything." Cole's throat bobbed. "And if you do come back?" Ethan's eyes went distant for a second. Lila's face dragged away. "Then we go together." Noah stood suddenly, trembling. "I want to go." Ethan crouched to him, voice gentle but firm. "No." Noah's eyes burned. "She got taken because of me." Ethan held his gaze. "She got taken because she protected you. You honor that by staying alive, by staying with Ada, by keeping Maggie warm. That's your job." Noah's chin wobbled. He fought tears like they were shame. "Yes, sir," he whispered. Ethan squeezed his shoulder, one quick, steadying touch. "You're brave," he said, "even when it hurts." Noah swallowed hard and nodded. Lila's voice echoed in Ethan's head. "Don't let them take you back." He rose. "We move now." Night on the prairie didn't feel like darkness. It felt like something watching. They traveled without lanterns, using snow glow and the low outline of fences. Ben led them, pointing with 2 fingers instead of speaking. Cole didn't come. He stayed back with the children, face tight with helplessness. When Crane's ranch came into view, it looked peaceful from a distance. Big house with warm windows, barn silhouettes, a line of cottonwoods, smoke curling from chimneys like it was any other winter night. Up close, you could hear the truth. Laughter, men's voices thick with liquor, a horse stamping in a corral, a child's cough, faint, muffled, quickly silenced. Ethan's jaw clenched. Ben pointed. The smokehouse, small, squat building with no windows, half buried in drift, door padlocked. Ada whispered, "Kids are in there." Ethan nodded. "Cal, with me. Ada, Sarah, stay back. If anything goes wrong, get the door open and run them. Ben, you're our eyes." Ben swallowed. "Yes." They moved low along the fence line. Cal's hands shook. Not fear, rage. At the corner of the main house, they paused. From inside Crane's office, a man bellowed laughter. "To the drifter bleeding out!" Harlan's voice smug. Ethan's vision narrowed. He forced it back. Later. Pruitt stumbled out of the office door a moment later, swaying, adjusting his belt. Keys jingled. Ethan's body went still. Ben leaned close, barely breathing. "That's him." Ethan waited until Pruitt turned toward the barn to relieve himself, as drunk men did when they thought they owned the world. Then Ethan moved. He came up behind Pruitt like shadow and slammed a forearm across the man's throat, hauling him back into the dark beside the wall. Pruitt choked, flailing. Cal stepped in and drove a fist into Pruitt's gut, knocking the air out clean. Pruitt's eyes bulged. He tried to shout. Ethan's voice was a razor in his ear. "Make a sound and I break your neck." Pruitt gagged, terrified now, the liquor not enough to protect him from consequence. Ethan yanked the keyring from Pruitt's belt. "How many kids in the smokehouse?" Pruitt shook his head frantically. Cal leaned in, voice shaking with fury. "Answer!" Pruitt wheezed, barely audible. "6, maybe 7. "Names," Ethan demanded. Pruitt's eyes flicked toward the house as if begging Crane to save him. I don't." Ethan tightened his grip until Pruitt's face reddened. "Names," Pruitt choked out. "They're just. Ethan slammed him once into the wall, not enough to kill, enough to wake him. "They're children," Pruitt sobbed suddenly, pathetic. "I don't know their names." Ethan held him one more second, then shoved him down into the snow behind the barn, out cold with one clean strike to the side of the head. Cal stared at Ethan like he'd never seen restraint used as a weapon. Ethan turned. "Keys, now." They reached the smokehouse door. Ada was already there, crouched, breath tight. Sarah's hands were clenched as if she wanted to pray and punch at the same time. Ben took the keys, hands shaking, tried one, wrong, then another. Click. The padlock fell open. Ada yanked the door. The smell hit first, cold rot, sweat, fear. Too many bodies breathing and too little air. Inside, children blinked in the dark, huddled together like animals in a storm. One boy had a chain around his ankle, another had bruises on his jaw. A girl no older than Clara stared with dead eyes, lips cracked. Ada didn't hesitate. "Out," she whispered, voice fierce and gentle at once. "Come on, quiet feet, quiet breaths." A boy didn't move. He stared at the open door like it was a trick. Ethan crouched, voice low. "Hey, I'm not Law. I'm not taking you back." The boy's lips trembled. "They said, if we run, they cut us." Ethan's throat tightened. He nodded once. "I believe you." Then he did the only thing that made the boy's eyes change. Ethan held out his hand and said, "But you can still come with me." The boy stared at his hand like it was a miracle he didn't deserve. Then, shaking, he reached and grabbed it. They moved fast, slipping children into the shadows behind the barn, toward the fence line where Cole's route would start. Sarah gathered them, whispering directions, not prayers. But one child stumbled and hit the fence rail. Wood snapped. The sound cracked through the night. Inside the house, laughter paused. A chair scraped. A voice, Harlan, sharp. What was that? Ethan's body went cold. Ada hissed, "Move!" They pushed the children forward, faster now, panic rising. From the house, the office door slammed open. Bootsteps hit the porch. Harlan's voice rang out into the yard. "Who's out there?" Ethan turned toward the house, keys tight in his fist, and made a choice with no hesitation. "Ben," he snapped, "get them moving. Ada, go." Ada looked at him. "And you?" Ethan's eyes lifted to the upstairs window. One room with no open latch, one room with a woman who had the truth in her boot and a target on her back. "I'm bringing her home," Ethan said. Then he ran for the house as voices erupted behind him, and the ranch yard began to wake like a beast. Ethan hit the back porch like a man who'd stopped asking permission to breathe. The ranch house loomed warm and bright behind him, windows glowing with lamplight, as if cruelty needed good lighting to feel respectable. Behind the barn, the rescued children were moving. Ada's low, urgent voice guiding them, Sarah's hands pushing little shoulders forward, Ben Harper counting under his breath like numbers could keep them alive. Somewhere out in the yard, a horse screamed again, and men's voices rose into the cold. Harlan's voice cut through it all. "Lights! Get lights!" A lantern flared to life near the corral. Then another. Yellow light began to crawl across snow like something searching for blood. Ethan didn't look back. He went inside. Heat slapped him in the face, heavy with cigar smoke and spilled whiskey. The entryway floors were polished wood, clean enough to eat off, clean enough to pretend nobody ever bled here. Ethan's boots tracked snow across it, and for a second he enjoyed the disrespect. Voices from the office to the left, drunk, irritated, sharpening into alarm. "Something's wrong," a man muttered. "I heard a crack," Harlan snapped. Pruitt, where the hell are you?" Ethan moved fast and quiet, hugging the wall, using the house's own wealth against it, thick carpets that swallowed footfalls. He knew which room he needed without being told twice. Upstairs, a latch locked from the outside, a woman held like a secret. A staircase rose ahead, curving, elegant. Ethan took it 2 steps at a time, shoulders screaming with every jolt. Halfway up, a door opened at the end of the upstairs hallway. A man stepped out, adjusting his suspenders, yawning like nothing in the world mattered. Ethan froze in shadow. The man turned, eyes half-lidded, and then they widened. "Who?" Ethan was on him before the word finished. He slammed the man into the wall, forearm pinning his throat, breath close enough to taste whiskey. "Make a sound," Ethan whispered, "and I swear you won't make another." The man's eyes bulged. He nodded fast, terrified. Ethan shoved him into a side room and shut the door without locking it. Locks took time. Downstairs, boots pounded. The office door banged open. Somebody shouted, "Smokehouse is open!" The ranch woke all the way up then. The polite house became what it really was, a nest of men scrambling to keep their money from spilling out. Ethan reached the end of the hallway. 3 doors. One had a new padlock on the outside latch, bright brass against white-painted wood, like putting jewelry on a cage. He stopped in front of it and spoke low, not to the house, not to anyone below. "Lila." Silence. He tried again, even softer. "Lila, it's Ethan." A pause so long it hurt, then a voice on the other side, rough and steady. "If you're a trick, I'll die before I open." Ethan's throat tightened. Relief hit him so hard his eyes stung. "You're not dying," he said. "Not tonight." He tested the lock. Solid. He could shoot it off, but the sound would bring the whole house up the stairs. He could break the latch, but it would splinter loud. His gaze snapped to the hallway table beside him, a decorative brass candlestick, heavy and useless except as a weapon. Ethan grabbed it. He struck the lock once. Metal rang. He winced. The sound wasn't a gunshot, but it was a bell in a quiet house. He struck again. The lock bent. Footsteps below changed direction, someone starting up the stairs. Ethan struck a 3rd time. The lock cracked, half-sheared. Inside, Lila's voice came sharper. "Ethan, they're coming." "I know," he said through clenched teeth. He lifted the candlestick and brought it down with everything he had left. The lock snapped. Ethan ripped the latch free and shoved the door open. Lila stood inside the room barefoot, hair loose, face bruised, lips split, and her eyes were on him like he was something she'd stopped believing in. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't folded. She was upright, ready. In the dim lamplight, she looked at him and didn't whisper. "You're alive," she said, and it wasn't relief. It was a fact she needed to anchor herself. Ethan's mouth tightened. "So are you." He stepped in, grabbed a blanket off the bed, and wrapped it around her shoulders without thinking. When she flinched, he paused instantly. Lila exhaled and forced herself to accept it. "I'm fine." "No," Ethan said low. "You're not. But you're moving." Lila nodded once. "I have something." She lifted one boot slightly. "Proof." Ethan's eyes sharpened. "Good. Keep it on you." From the stairwell, a shout. "Upstairs, now!" Ben Harper's voice cut from outside the house, faint but urgent. "Ethan, they're coming around the north side." Ethan grabbed Lila's hand, quick, firm, and pulled her out into the hall. Her fingers were cold and strong. They ran. They didn't go back down the main stairs. That was where the men would flood. Ben had told them about the servants' stairs, narrow, tucked behind the kitchen. Ethan found the door and yanked it open. They took the stairs 3 at a time, Ethan in front, Lila right behind him. She moved like someone who'd spent a lifetime learning to stay quiet, only now quiet was a weapon, not obedience. At the bottom, the kitchen smelled like stew and soap and money. A maid gasped when she saw them. Lila didn't stop. Ethan didn't apologize. They burst out the back door into the yard. Cold hit like a slap. Lanterns swung. Men shouted. A rifle cracked somewhere near the barn, and a splinter of fence snapped. Ada's voice was out there, hard, commanding. "Keep them low. Keep them moving." Ethan spotted them in the dark line of cottonwoods beyond the corral. Children bundled and stumbling, Sarah pushing from behind, Ben leading, Cal carrying one small boy whose legs had gone weak from fear. Harlan was between Ethan and that line, half lit by lantern glow, grin sharp as a knife. "There he is," Harlan shouted, "and he's got her. Crane stepped out onto the porch behind him, like the king arriving late to his own violence. He didn't shout, he didn't run. He simply watched, confident that money always caught up. Lila saw him and her jaw tightened, but she didn't shrink. Crane's voice carried calm across the yard. "Lila, come back, this doesn't end the way you think." Lila's voice came back louder than she realized she could be. "It already ended. You just haven't noticed." Crane's smile barely moved. "You're frightened. That's why you're saying foolish things." Ethan shoved Lila forward toward the cottonwoods. "Go." Lila didn't move. Ethan turned to her, eyes fierce. "Go with the kids, I'll meet you." Lila stared at him, something like panic flashing. "No, I'm not leaving you again." A rider swung in, cutting off the path. Another rider flanked. The circle tightened. Ethan felt the moment for what it was. If he stayed in the open, they'd take her again, take the kids again. They didn't need bullets. They had numbers. He made himself a wall. He stepped away from Lila, toward the lantern light, toward Harlan and the men who wanted him on his knees. He lifted his hand slightly, just enough to look like surrender. Harlan's grin widened. "That's right." Ethan smiled back cold. "You want me? Come get me." Harlan lunged, hand reaching for Ethan's collar. Ethan moved fast, faster than a drunk man expected. He grabbed Harlan's wrist, twisted, and drove his shoulder into Harlan's chest, slamming him into the snow. Harlan went down hard, breath exploding out of him. At the same instant, Ethan barked, "Now!" Lila ran. She sprinted for the cottonwoods, blankets streaming behind her like a torn flag. She hit the tree line, grabbed the nearest child, Maggie still weak, and helped Ada hoist her. Noah saw Lila and made a sound that wasn't a scream this time. It was relief so raw it broke him. "Lila!" Noah cried, and his whole body shook. Lila grabbed his face with both hands. "I'm here," she said, steady. "I'm here." Shots cracked behind them. Trees splintered. Someone yelled, "Don't let them get to the fence!" Ben Harper shoved the kids forward. "Move! Move!" Cal lifted a boy onto his horse. Sarah pushed Clara and Jonah into the brush, her own breath a ragged prayer she refused to speak out loud. Ethan backed toward them, dragging Harlan's attention with him like a chain. Two men rushed. Ethan swung the brass candlestick like a hammer and caught one in the jaw. The man fell, stunned. A third man raised his rifle. Ben Harper saw it from the tree line. He shouted, "Ethan!" Ben stepped out to draw the aim away from the kids, and the world slowed for a heartbeat. The rifle cracked. Ben jerked as if yanked by invisible hands. He staggered, eyes wide with surprise, then dropped into the snow on his knees. Ethan's blood went cold. Sarah screamed Ben's name and ran 2 steps before Ada caught her arm. "If you go out there, you die too." Ben looked up from the snow, face pale, breath steaming. He wasn't dead yet. He was trying to breathe through pain that didn't let him. He met Ethan's eyes across the yard and forced words out like they were heavy. "Get them out." Ethan's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He nodded once because it was the only promise he could make. Ethan grabbed Ben under the arms and hauled him backward toward the cottonwoods. A shot snapped past them. Ethan didn't stop. He didn't let go. They hit the tree line. Ada's hands were on Ben instantly, pressing cloth to the wound. Sarah's face was streaked with tears she didn't have time to wipe. Ben's eyes fluttered. Lila stood over them, chest heaving, and she didn't whisper a single word. Ethan turned to the children. "You run east," he ordered. "Stay low. Stay together. Cole's route. Ada knows it." Ada nodded, jaw set. "I do." Crane's men were already regrouping. Lanterns bobbed. Riders moved to cut off the open field. Ethan looked past the trees toward the narrow cut of land Ben had described earlier, a rocky draw that led into a canyon where horses couldn't fan wide. Their only chance was terrain. "Canyon," Ethan said. "We funnel them." Ada's eyes narrowed. "With kids?" "With kids we don't let slow," Ethan corrected. "We carry the ones who can't." Cal lifted Maggie without argument, cradling her like she weighed nothing. Clara grabbed Jonah's sleeve and pulled him along, teeth clenched. Noah stayed tight to Lila, as if his body had decided letting go was no longer an option. They ran. Snow grabbed at their boots, but fear gave them speed. Behind them, hooves thundered as the riders gave chase, confident again, loud again. Ethan kept glancing at Ben, who was half carried by Sarah and Ada. Ben's face was gray, but he kept blinking, kept breathing, stubborn even now. "Don't you die," Sarah whispered at him, furious. "Don't you dare." Ben's lips barely moved, trying. They reached the draw just as the sky began to lighten, winter dawn leaking in thin and cruel. The canyon mouth yawned ahead, rock walls rising, narrowing the world into one brutal path. Ethan shoved the group into it. Single file! They pushed through, breath burning, hands scraping rock for balance. The horses behind them slowed as the riders realized they couldn't spread out. Yells echoed off stone, louder, angrier. Harlan's voice bounced down the canyon. You can't hide in a hole, Rourke. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't waste air. A child stumbled. Clara caught him. Jonah, silent as ever, reached out and steadied Clara without looking at her. A small touch, a crack in his wall. Lila kept moving, Noah glued to her, her boot heavy with the paper she'd stolen from Crane's office. Proof thudding against her ankle with every step, like the truth itself was running with them. At the far end of the canyon, the land opened into a frozen creek bed that led toward town roads. Ethan could see it already in his mind. Rollins, outsiders, witnesses, a place where Crane's money had to work harder, but the riders weren't letting go. Hooves clattered on rock behind them now, closer than before. Ethan's eyes swept the canyon walls, loose shale, narrow ledges, places a man could stand and slow an army for a minute. He made a choice and grabbed Cal's shoulder. Keep them going, Ethan said. Cal's eyes widened. Ethan's voice was iron. Keep them going. Lila heard it. She turned, eyes sharp with fear and fury. No more leaving. Ethan met her gaze. This isn't leaving, he said. This is buying you daylight. Lila's throat worked. She looked at Noah, at Maggie in Cal's arms, at Ben sagging between Ada and Sarah, bleeding into cloth. Then she looked at Ethan again, and her voice came steady as stone. Then you meet us at the creek road. You promised. Ethan nodded once. I promised. He stepped toward the rock wall as the others pushed forward into the widening light, the sound of pursuit swelling behind them, the first pale strip of dawn cutting across snow like a blade. Ethan climbed the rock wall like his ribs didn't matter. His fingers found holds in frozen shale, his boots scraping for purchase, while the sound of hooves hammered closer behind him. He didn't need to see the riders to know how near they were. He could hear the metal of bits, the clatter of shoes on stone, the sharp breath of men who thought the hunt was theirs. He hauled himself onto a narrow ledge and looked down the canyon. Lantern light bobbed below. Harlan's voice carried up, bright with hunger. He's in there. Don't let him out. Ethan's hands closed around a slab of loose rock. It shifted under his grip, heavy and ready. He braced his shoulder, felt pain spike, and pushed anyway. Stone groaned. Then the rock gave. It slid. Gathered speed became a blunt avalanche. It crashed down into the narrow throat of the canyon, and the sound was like the world breaking apart. Horses screamed. Men shouted. A rider went down hard, lantern shattering, light snuffed. Ethan didn't watch the damage. He dropped back to the lower path on the far side, landed wrong, and pain flared up his leg. He bit it down, forced air into his lungs, and ran. Behind him, the canyon became a choke point of chaos, exactly what he needed. A minute, two, enough daylight to buy lives. He found his horse where he'd tied it earlier, under a scrubby pine. The animal was restless, eyes wide, sensing danger. Ethan swung up one-handed, the other clutching his side, and kicked the horse into motion. Go, he rasped. Go, go. The creek road ran like a scar through the open country, pale under the early sun. Frost glittered on every branch. The world looked clean, and Ethan hated it for that. He rode hard until his vision blurred at the edges. Every breath hit his ribs like a hammer. He didn't slow. Not until he saw them. A line of moving bodies ahead, Ada and Sarah half carrying Ben Harper, Cal with Maggie in his arms, Clara dragging Jonah along with the stubborn fury of someone refusing to be left behind, and Lila, walking straight-backed with Noah glued to her side like a shadow that had decided to live. Ethan's throat tightened so hard he almost choked. Lila heard hoofbeats and spun. For a second, her face went white, fear rising. Then she saw him. The look that crossed her face wasn't soft, it wasn't grateful. It was raw relief trying to break through steel. You promised, she said, and her voice didn't shake. Ethan swung down, nearly falling when his boots hit the frozen ground. He caught himself, stubborn. I don't break promises. Noah made a small sound and stepped toward Ethan like he didn't know whether he was allowed. Ethan crouched, ignoring the scream in his ribs, and held out a hand. Noah grabbed it, tight, desperate. Ethan squeezed once. "You did your job," Noah's chin wobbled. "I kept Maggie warm." "You did," Ethan said. "That's brave." Noah blinked hard. "They didn't take us back." "They won't," Ethan said, and he let the certainty sit in his voice like a shield. Ada shifted Ben's weight and snapped, "Talk later. Move now." Ben's face was gray, but he was still conscious, still fighting for air like he was determined to earn redemption with every breath. Sarah's hands were slick with blood, and she looked furious at the whole world for making her learn how to press a wound shut. "How far?" Cal asked, voice tight. "Rollins by mid-afternoon if we don't stop," Ada said, "if the roads are passable." Ethan's gaze went past them toward the horizon. "And if Crane's men didn't quit?" Lila's hand went to her boot instinctively. "They won't quit." "Then we don't quit first," Ethan said. They moved again. No lanterns, no main roads. They kept to shallow dips in the land and fence lines that broke their outline. When they crossed open stretches, they crossed fast. By the time the first buildings of Rollins came into view, the sun was already low and cold, casting long shadows across snow-packed streets. Smoke rose from chimneys in steady columns. A railroad spur cut through town like a promise of somewhere else. Men in work coats moved between cars, outsiders, witnesses who didn't know Crane's name well enough to fear it. Ada exhaled like she'd been holding her lungs shut for a year. Here. Rollins wasn't clean, but it wasn't owned the way Ethan's town was owned. People looked up when they saw the children, when they saw Ben bleeding, when they saw Lila's bruised face and Ethan's bandaged shoulder. They stared longer than was polite. And then, some of them frowned, like the sight bothered something in them they'd kept quiet. Ethan didn't take them to an inn. Inns asked questions. Inns talked. He took them straight to the courthouse building near the center, 2 stories, plain, solid, with a flag hanging stiff in the cold. A territorial marshal stood outside, stamping his boots, hands tucked in his coat. The marshal's eyes narrowed as Ethan approached. "You folks lost?" Ethan kept his voice controlled. "We need a judge." The marshal's gaze slid to Ben. "That man's bleeding." Ben forced words through pain. "Deputy Ben Harper, sworn, county line." The marshal's expression changed, a flicker of respect, then suspicion. "What happened to you?" Ben swallowed hard. "Sheriff McCall is bought." The words landed like a stone. Even in Rollins, saying a sheriff was bought was the kind of thing that got you watched. The marshal's gaze shifted to the children, to Maggie and Cal's arms, to Jonah's empty stare, to Noah's bandaged hands, then to Lila. Lila stepped forward before anyone could speak over her. "My name is Lila Hart," she said, clear and loud. "I was held under false guardianship by Darius Crane. He sells children into labor." "I have proof." The marshal stared at her for a long beat. "Proof is a strong word." Lila didn't blink. "Then listen to it." She reached into her boot, pulled the folded paper free, and held it out like she was offering a blade handle first. The marshal took it, eyes scanning. Names, dates, destinations, escort, sheriff's involvement, foreman's signatures. His face tightened. He looked up slowly. "Where did you get this?" Lila's voice stayed steady. "From Crane's ledger, from his office, while he slept downstairs and his men drank to a man they thought they killed." Ethan felt the marshal's eyes flick to him, felt the town's attention sharpening like a knife. The marshal's jaw worked. "Judge Eddings is in town for filings. Court's not scheduled today." Ethan's voice was iron. "Schedule it." The marshal's gaze flicked to Ben again. Blood, badge, shame turned into action. Then he looked at the children. Finally, he nodded once, curt. "Inside. Now." They were led into a room that smelled of old wood, ink, and cold authority. A clerk looked up, startled at the procession. The marshal barked orders. A bench was cleared. Someone ran for the judge. While they waited, Ada set Ben down gently on a blanket near the stove. Sarah kept pressure on the wound, mouth moving like she was talking him back into the world. Clara hovered over Jonah, hands clenched. "You're not going to disappear," she muttered at him, as if the words could nail him to the floor. Jonah's eyes flicked to her. For a second, only a second, his fingers loosened on the spoon, and he let her hand touch his sleeve. Then he went still again, like contact was a language he didn't know how to speak. Noah sat close to Lila, shoulder pressed to her side. "Are we safe?" he whispered. Lila looked down at him and answered the truth, not the comfort. We're safer. That's all anyone gets. Noah swallowed. Is Ethan safe? Lila's eyes lifted to Ethan, and for a moment her steel cracked. He better be. Ethan heard it and didn't pretend he hadn't. He kept his posture calm, but inside him something uncoiled, something like the shape of home trying to exist again. The door opened. Judge Eddings entered, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a face that had seen too many lies. 2 lawyers trailed behind him, curious. A couple railroad men wandered in the back, drawn by rumor and the sight of a bleeding deputy. The judge took one look at the children and the blood and sighed like his day had just turned honest. "What is this?" he said. "And why are you in my building like a storm?" Lila stood. No one told her to, no one gave permission. She simply rose, and the room shifted around her like it had to make space. "My name is Lila Hart," she said again, "and I'm done being quiet." The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. "All right, speak." Lila held the paper up. "Darius Crane sells children into forced labor. He pays Sheriff McCall to escort them. He uses guardianship and debt to make it look lawful. This list is from his ledger." One of the lawyers stepped forward, skeptical. "That's a serious accusation, Miss Hart," Lila snapped, and the sharpness in her voice made the man pause. "Read the names. Ask the families where their children went. Ask the mine boss why boys show up with shackles on their ankles." The judge's gaze went to the marshal. "Did you verify this?" The marshal's jaw tightened. "Not yet, but this," he tapped the paper, "this isn't a story, it's accounting." The judge exhaled slow. "Deputy Harper." Ben's eyes fluttered open. He forced himself upright with Sarah's help, face slick with pain. "Yes, sir," Ben rasped. The judge's voice was firm. "Do you swear under oath that Sheriff McCall is complicit in trafficking children into labor?" Ben's throat bobbed. The room held its breath. Ben's voice shook once, then steadied, like a man stepping off a cliff and deciding to stand in the air anyway. "Yes," he said. "I swear it." A murmur rippled through the room. One railroad man cursed softly. The skeptical lawyer went pale. The judge's eyes narrowed. "And do you swear this woman was held against her will?" Ben swallowed hard. "Yes." Lila's hands clenched at her sides. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She looked the judge in the eye and made herself undeniable. "Your Honor," she said, voice lower now but harder, "Noah was going to be taken to the mine. Clara and Jonah and Maggie were locked in a shed like livestock. Those other children on that paper, some of them are already gone." The judge's gaze drifted to the kids, to Noah's bandaged hands, to Jonah's haunted eyes. He turned back to Lila. "Why didn't you go to your local sheriff?" Lila's laugh was short and bitter. "Because my local sheriff eats at Crane's table." The judge's jaw tightened. "Where is Crane now?" Ethan answered, blunt. "On his ranch, and coming." As if summoned by the words, boots sounded in the hallway outside the courtroom. Heavy, confident. The marshal moved toward the door, hand near his sidearm. The door swung open. Sheriff McCall entered first, broad, red-faced, coat too fine for a lawman who claimed humble wages. Behind him came Harlan, pale-eyed and smiling like a man at a show. And behind them all, Darius Crane, clean, calm, hat in his hands as if he was a concerned citizen arriving to resolve a misunderstanding. He looked at Lila, and his smile was soft enough to make her skin crawl. "There you are," Crane said, voice warm. "We've been worried sick." Lila's spine went rigid. Noah's fingers dug into her sleeve. Crane's eyes flicked to Noah, then back to the judge, performing concern like it was a talent. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "this young woman is under my guardianship. She's been frightened and misled. The boy is stolen property. The deputy," he glanced at Ben with polite disgust, "is confused by blood loss. I'm here to take what's mine home and settle this quietly." The judge's face went cold. "Mr. Crane, sit down." Crane didn't. He smiled wider. "I'd prefer to settle it without spectacle." Lila stepped forward one full pace, shoulders squared. "You don't get quiet anymore," she said. "Not from me." Crane's eyes sharpened, just a flicker, then smoothed again. "Lila, please, you're upset." "I'm not upset," Lila said, voice rising enough that the whole room heard. "I'm awake." The judge turned to Crane. If these documents are verified, your quiet becomes a criminal proceeding. Crane chuckled softly, as if amused by the idea of consequences. Verified by whom? Your clerk? Your outsiders? This is frontier gossip dressed up as ink. Ethan moved one step, but Lila lifted a hand, small, firm, telling him without looking. Not yet. Lila faced Crane and spoke in a voice that didn't belong to a whispering girl on a frozen road anymore. You don't own what you break, she said, and you can't buy back the children you threw away. The room went dead silent. Crane's smile finally faltered, just at the edges. Then Harlan, still grinning, leaned toward McCall and murmured something. McCall's gaze slid to Noah with a predatory calculation. Ethan saw it a half-second before it happened. Sheriff McCall lunged. His hand shot out for Noah's coat. Noah gasped and tried to duck, but the sheriff's fingers closed. Ethan moved like a gunshot without the sound. He grabbed McCall's wrist and twisted hard enough to make the sheriff grunt. The courtroom erupted. Shouts, chairs scraping, the marshal barking. Enough! Crane's voice snapped, losing warmth. Let him go! Lila stepped in front of Noah, eyes blazing. Touch him again, she said to the sheriff, and the whole territory will hear me scream your name until it rots. The judge slammed his gavel so hard it cracked the air. Marshal! The marshal seized McCall, yanking him back. Sit down, the marshal growled. Now? Crane's face went tight with controlled rage, the polite mask slipping at the edges. The judge looked at Lila, then at Ethan, then at Ben, bleeding on a blanket like proof with a pulse. This court will hold an emergency hearing, the judge said, voice like iron. Mr. Crane, Sheriff McCall, you will remain in this town until the documents are verified. Marshal, secure the children, secure the witnesses, no one leaves. Crane's eyes flashed, cold and furious, and he smiled anyway. Of course, he said softly, whatever the court requires. But his gaze slid once, quick as a knife, toward the door, toward the hallway, toward the outside world where men did dirty work while he kept his hands clean. Ethan felt the hair rise on his neck, because Crane had just been cornered in daylight, and cornered men didn't get quieter. They got desperate. Crane's smile stayed on his face like paint, even as the marshal's hand settled firmly on his elbow. Mr. Crane, the judge said, voice flat, you will remain seated. That is not a request. Crane held up his hands in a gesture that looked like surrender to anyone who hadn't lived under him. Of course, he said softly. I'm a lawful man. But his eyes slid again, quick, calculating, past the judge, past the benches, toward the door where night waited and hired hands didn't ask questions. Ethan didn't blink. He saw the exact second Crane decided that daylight rules were an inconvenience, not a boundary. The judge turned to the clerk. Write it down. Immediate injunction. Marshal, I want the children moved to a secure room with a guard. I want Deputy Harper taken to a physician. I want those documents copied twice and sealed. Crane's expression flickered. Just a hair. Copies meant his money couldn't erase a single page with a single match. Ben Harper tried to push himself upright, his face slick with pain. Your Honor, he rasped. Sarah pressed him down, furious and shaking. You already did your part. Now stay breathing. Ben swallowed and forced his eyes open anyway, as if stubbornness was the only thing keeping him in the room. Harlan, he whispered to the marshal, he won't stop. He'll try to take the boy. He always takes leverage. The marshal's jaw tightened. He barked to another man in a heavy coat near the back. Harris, you and 2 men on the hallway, now. Boots moved. The room shifted into a new shape, no longer a hearing, but a fight being fought with ink and bodies instead of bullets. Lila kept her hand on Noah's shoulder. She could feel his whole body trembling, but he didn't collapse. He stayed standing, eyes fixed on Crane, like a child learning what a monster looks like when it's forced to be polite. Crane looked down at Noah and sighed, almost tender. Boy, he said, come here. You don't need to be afraid. Noah's breath hitched. He tightened his grip on Lila's sleeve. Lila stepped forward half a pace, placing her body between Noah and Crane without even thinking. He isn't afraid of you, she said. He's done listening to you. Crane's eyes sharpened. Lila, he murmured, warning hidden under sweetness. You're making a spectacle. Lila's voice rose, steady and clear, so the whole room could hear her. Good. I want them to see you." That landed like a slap. For the first time, Crane's mask didn't quite sit right. Sheriff McCall shifted, face red with humiliation, eyes darting for a way out. Harlan's smile stayed, but it wasn't amused anymore. It was tight, hungry. The judge slammed his gavel again. "Marshal, remove Sheriff McCall's weapon." McCall jolted. "Now hold on." The marshal stepped in and unbuckled McCall's gun belt like he was taking a toy from a child. McCall's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Crane as if waiting for rescue. Crane didn't look at him at all. "Deputy Harlan," the judge said, cold. "You too." Harlan laughed softly. "Your Honor, I'm just an escort." "You're a potential threat in my courtroom," the judge snapped. "Hand it over." Harlan's hand hovered a fraction too long near his holster, and Ethan's muscles tensed. Then Harlan lifted his palms slowly and let the marshal take the gun. It looked like compliance. It wasn't. It was a man putting his weapon down because he knew he had another one waiting outside. They moved the children first. Noah, Clara, Jonah, Maggie, and the others Ada had pulled from the smokehouse. The marshal led them into a small side room with a stove and a lock, posting 2 men at the door. Ada stayed inside with them without being asked, her back straight, eyes sharp, hands ready. Lila hesitated on the threshold, fingers still gripping Noah's shoulder, like letting him out of her sight would break something in her. Noah looked up at her, voice small. "You coming?" Lila crouched so she was eye level with him. "I'm right here," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." Noah swallowed, fought tears like they were shame, then nodded once. "Okay." Lila stood. She didn't look at Crane. She didn't give him even a crumb of her fear. She walked back into the main room beside Ethan. Crane watched her like a man watching a lock he thought he'd broken suddenly start working again. The clerk began copying the paper Lila had brought. The judge leaned close to the list, reading names under his breath. A lawyer wrote fast, asking questions that sounded more like weapons now. Then, somewhere in the hallway, a shout. Not a courtroom shout, not a protest, a sharp, ugly sound of surprise. "Hey!" A second later, the courthouse windows rattled from a sudden thud outside, like something heavy had struck the wall. Men surged to their feet. The marshal snapped, "Stay seated." Smoke slipped under the hallway door, thin at first, then thicker. Ada's voice cut from behind the side room door, fierce and urgent. "Fire!" For a heartbeat, the room went still with the kind of fear that makes people stupid. Crane's mouth softened into a calm that didn't belong in panic. He lifted his voice, smooth. "Everyone remain calm. There's no need for—" Ethan moved before the sentence finished. He crossed the room and grabbed Crane's sleeve hard enough to wrinkle expensive cloth. Crane's eyes flashed, offended. "Let go." Ethan's voice was quiet and deadly. "You did this." Crane smiled, and for the first time it wasn't polite. "Prove it." Harlan took one step back toward the door, eyes darting, calculating the chaos. McCall shifted the same way, sweat on his lip. The judge stood, face hardening into pure authority. "Marshal, secure those men. Now, if anyone moves." Another shout in the hall, a crash, then the unmistakable crackle of flame. The marshal barked, "Harris, where's the fire?" A gunshot snapped outside. Everyone froze. Ben Harper's voice rose from his blanket near the stove, ragged. "He's doing it," Ben rasped. "He's making it look like an accident." Sarah's face went white. Ben tried to sit up, swayed, then forced himself steady anyway. "If they panic, they'll run, and he'll take the boy." Lila's blood went cold. She spun toward the side room door where Noah was. 2 guards stood there, but smoke was already creeping along the ceiling, making eyes water, making men cough, making order slippery. Crane's gaze followed hers like he could smell exactly what she feared. He didn't move fast. He didn't have to. He merely leaned slightly toward Harlan, as if sharing a private thought. Harlan's eyes flicked once toward the side room. Then he moved. He shoved past the nearest man in the confusion, shoulder-checking him, and lunged for the side room door. Ethan intercepted him in 2 strides and slammed him into the wall so hard the wood shook. Harlan grunted, tried to twist free. "You touch that door," Ethan growled, "and you lose the hand." Harlan's smile showed teeth now. "You can't stop everything, Rourke." Ethan shoved him harder. "Watch me." McCall, seeing his chance, surged toward the front exit in the smoke. The marshal caught him by the collar and hauled him back. "Where do you think you're going?" "Fire!" McCall shouted, trying to turn cowardice into an excuse. "We gotta—" "You're not leaving," the marshal snapped. "Not until I say." Crane stood very still, eyes calm, hands relaxed, like a man at a dinner party while everyone else choked on smoke. Lila's chest heaved, her eyes burned, but she didn't cough. She forced air into her lungs and did what she'd never done in her life. She took command of the room with her voice. "No one moves the children but me and Ada," she shouted, loud enough to cut through panic. "No one takes them out that door, not even law." The words snapped heads toward her. For a second, even the men coughing in the hallway hesitated, because a woman speaking like that made the whole building feel different. The judge's eyes locked onto Lila, recognition flaring. This wasn't hysteria. This was testimony with a spine. The marshal coughed, then barked to his men. "Harris, 2 men on the children's door. Nobody touches it. Do you hear me?" Footsteps ran. The side room door was flanked, shielded. Crane's expression tightened by a thread. The simple plan, create chaos, grab leverage, disappear, was being pinned down by something he couldn't buy. A woman's voice that didn't whisper. Outside, the fire crackled louder. Someone yelled, "Bucket line!" Townmen scrambled, feet thudding, cold air rushing every time the main door opened. The judge pointed at the clerk. "Seal the copies, now!" The clerk's hands shook, but he did it. Wax, stamp, paper, bound into something that couldn't be unsaid. Ethan kept Harlan pinned, eyes flicking to Crane. "You still think you're leaving?" Crane's voice stayed smooth, but anger bled under it. "This is chaos. People will die in this building if you don't let us out." Ethan's mouth curled. "You're worried about people dying now?" Crane's eyes flashed, then cooled. "I'm worried about my ward's safety." Lila stepped toward Crane through the smoke like she didn't feel it. Her face was bruised, her lips split, her hair wild, and her voice was clean. "You are not my guardian," she said. "You are my captor." Crane's smile returned, thin. "Lila, look at yourself. You're frightened. You're making claims." Lila lifted the sealed copy of the list as the clerk handed it to the marshal, and she held it up for everyone to see. "These aren't claims. These are names." She turned to the railroad men in the back, outsiders who'd been hovering, unsure if decency was their job. "You have telegraph access," she said. "You have bosses in other towns. You can send this beyond Crane's reach, will you?" The older railroad man, tired eyes, guilt-heavy, looked at Noah's bandaged hands through the side room window. His throat bobbed. Then he nodded once, slow, ashamed, and determined. "Yes," he said. The mustached man opened his mouth to object. The older man cut him off. "Don't," he said quietly. "Not today." Crane's jaw tightened. He took one step toward the marshal, voice turning sharp for the first time. "This is my reputation being dragged through mud." Lila stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You dragged children through mud. You dragged them into chains. Now you get what you gave." Crane's mask finally slipped. His face went cold, not polite, not charming, just empty. "You think you've won because you have paper," he hissed, low enough only she and Ethan could hear. "Paper burns." Lila's eyes didn't waver. "So do men." Crane's gaze flicked, calculating toward the doorway again, but the marshal was already moving, coughing, determined. He grabbed Crane's wrists and snapped iron cuffs on him with one clean motion. Crane jerked, outraged. "You can't." "I can," the marshal said. "Because now I have witnesses, a wounded deputy, sealed copies, and a judge who's done being polite." Harlan thrashed under Ethan's grip like a snake. "You're making a mistake." Ethan slammed Harlan into the wall one last time and let the marshal's men take him. Harlan's grin was gone now. He looked like a man realizing he'd bet his whole life on someone else's money. The courthouse door burst open, and a rush of cold air and shouting swept in. "Fire's out," someone yelled. "Mostly, it's out." Smoke began to thin, drawn toward open windows. Men coughed, women covered mouths. The panic ebbed, leaving behind the sharp, humiliating truth. Somebody had tried to burn justice down before it could speak. Crane stood cuffed in the middle of the room, coat wrinkled, hair slightly out of place. He looked smaller without his control. He lifted his chin anyway, trying to return to the posture of a man the world bowed to. Lila walked past him without looking away. She went to the side room door. The guard opened it. Warm air rolled out, smelling of stove heat and fear. Noah bolted into her as soon as he saw her, arms wrapping tight around her waist. He shook like he'd been holding his breath the whole time she was gone. Lila folded down around him and held him with both arms, eyes closing for a second, as if she was pressing herself back into her own body. Then she opened them again. Clara stood behind Noah, chin lifted, trying not to cry. Jonah hovered near the wall, silent, watching. Maggie lay bundled on a blanket, breathing softly. Ada looked at Lila, eyes fierce. "You done?" Lila's voice was hoarse from smoke, but it didn't waver. "I'm done." Ethan appeared in the doorway, ribs aching, shoulder burning, face smudged with soot. Noah looked up at him, eyes wide. Is he going away?" Noah asked, trembling. Ethan glanced at Crane across the room, cuffed, watched, finally unable to reach. "Yes," Ethan said. "He's going away." Noah's mouth opened and a sob slipped out before he could stop it. He covered his face with his bandaged hands, ashamed of sound. Lila took his hands gently and lowered them. "It's okay," she said. "You can cry here." Noah cried then, openly, shoulders shaking, because the world had finally given him a place where his tears didn't cost him safety. The judge's voice rose behind them, firm, carrying over the room as the marshal's men dragged Crane, McCall, and Harlan toward the holding cell. "This court authorizes immediate warrants, search of Crane's property, seizure of ledgers, protective custody for the children, and by God, if any man interferes, he'll answer to the territory, not his friends." Ada exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding a lifetime in her lungs. Sarah stood near Ben Harper, who lay pale on his blanket, eyes fluttering. The town doctor had arrived and was working fast, hands stained, voice sharp with orders. Ben's breathing was thin but steady, still fighting. He turned his head slightly, eyes finding Lila through the crowd. Lila stepped closer. She didn't kneel. She didn't shrink. She simply met his gaze. Ben's lips moved. "Did it work?" Lila's voice softened, the only softness she allowed herself. "Yes," she said. "It worked." Ben's eyes filled with relief he didn't deserve but needed anyway. He let out a shaky breath and closed his eyes, not gone, just resting finally. Outside, the sky was clear and cold, and the town kept moving as if nothing had changed. But inside that courthouse, something had shifted that couldn't be shoved back into the dark. Later, when the guards had doubled and the sealed copies were in the judge's own hands, when Ada had blankets wrapped around every child and the stove was fed until it roared, Lila stood in the courthouse doorway with Ethan beside her. The street was packed snow and boot prints. People watched from windows, some with shame, some with fear. Some with something like respect they didn't know how to show. Lila looked up at Ethan. Her eyes were tired, bruised, alive. "I asked you once," she said quietly, voice steady, "if I could ride with you." Ethan's throat tightened. "You did." Lila's chin lifted. "I'm not asking like that again." Ethan's mouth pulled into the smallest real smile he'd worn in years. "Good." Lila looked back toward the side room, where Noah's quiet breathing mixed with Maggie's soft sighs, where Clara sat stiff with her fists clenched, where Jonah watched the world like it might finally stop hitting him. Then she faced Ethan again. "Where do we go now?" Ethan didn't look toward his burned cabin. He didn't look toward the town that had looked away. He looked at her and the children, and the answer came out simple, plain, true. "We go where you can stand on your own land," he said, "where they can sleep without chains in their dreams, and we build something that doesn't whisper." Lila swallowed hard. Then she nodded once, like a woman choosing her life with her whole voice. Noah appeared in the doorway behind her, clutching the edge of her coat, eyes red but steady. He looked at Ethan, then at Lila, then back at Ethan again. "Do we stay together?" he asked, small and brave. Ethan crouched to him, ignoring the pain, and answered the only way a man could answer if he meant it. "Yeah," he said. "We stay together." Noah stared for a second, as if trying to understand a world where promises could be real. Then he nodded, and he took Lila's hand with one bandaged one and Ethan's sleeve with the other, and held on like he'd finally learned what belonging felt like.